Did you know that you can see artifacts related to the JFK assassination right here in Gettysburg? Well, it's true. The Gettysburg Museum of History has fascinating artifacts from John F. Kennedy's presidency and that fateful day in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. And that's just one more reason for you to stop by the Gettysburg Museum of History the next time you come to town. Stop by and see them at 219 Baltimore Street in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And this episode is brought to you without commercial interruption by the Gettysburg Museum of History. That's Gettysburg Museum of History, 219 Baltimore Street, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Oh, Grandpa, there has to be a reason why Bob asked Lisa, because this is the first time he's invited her here or anywhere else, as a matter of fact, since they've been divorced.
Did you ask him why he invited her?
He said something about not wanting her to have Thanksgiving dinner alone. He didn't think it was right.
It was real nice of the boy.
And I thought about it, and I gave it a great deal of thought, Grandpa.
United Press says that the wounds for President Kennedy perhaps could be fatal. Repeating, a bulletin from CBS News, President Kennedy has been shot by a would-be assassin in Dallas, Texas. Stay tuned to CBS News for...
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special edition of Addressing Gettysburg. Today we're talking about JFK's assassination. It's the 60th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the 35th president of the United States. And some of you may be saying, this is Addressing Gettysburg. Why are you talking about something that happened in the 20th century? Well, behind me on the wall there is a picture of JFK visiting here about 6 months before he was killed, and that's connection enough for me. Joining me today is the esteemed Dr. Jennifer Murray. Welcome, Jen.
Matt, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. And listen, we conceived this idea, we concocted this idea back in, I think, August, and I've been looking forward to it ever since.
As have I.
Because it's nice to jump out of what you're normally studying and have a little fun somewhere else. Right?
I agree.
But when I say have a little fun, I don't think I mean that we're going to take this lightly. I mean, this is about the death of a human being and the president of the United States. So that's not a funny thing to talk about. And so we're going to try to be as serious as we possibly can, but we're not very serious people. So who knows what'll happen. I think the first thing, Jen, that we should do is talk about why this is one of our other favorite topics in American history. We'll start with you since you're the guest.
Great. So, as you mentioned, most people, I suspect, know me as coming onto your show more than one occasion to talk about Civil War stuff. But the Kennedy assassination was actually the first event of historical significance that I was interested in. Mm-hmm. Before I was interested in Civil War and Gettysburg stuff, my passion as an undergraduate was the 1960s. And I was really interested in President Kennedy and then the Kennedy assassination and some of his policies as president and Vietnam and the Cold War era. And the first academic conference I presented at was a conference in Dallas called the November in Dallas Conference. I was a junior in my undergraduate program, and I wrote a research paper on the single bullet theory.
Oh, really?
Which was quite a big deal. I got my undergraduate degree from Frostburg State, and I wrote this paper for a political science class, actually. My professor there was also really interested in the Kennedy assassination. And we went to Dallas together and presented a paper at this conference. I walked the grounds of Dealey Plaza for the first time, went to a lot of the Kennedy assassination sites. So it was interesting to see these sites that I've read about, like we experience here at Gettysburg firsthand, right?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
read about it, but now you see all these sites, Jack Ruby's nightclub, the police office station, Oswald's grave, where Tippit was killed, and seeing all these sites was great. So it was something I was interested in for a long time. So when we were chatting about this over the summer, our common passions for the Kennedy assassination made it timely to do something like this.
We kind of accidentally discovered it.
We did.
I think, well, it was a flippant comment about the JFK assassination, and then you said, oh, that's my other favorite area of history.
It is.
You were obsessed with it before the Civil War.
Before the Civil War, yeah. And here we are on the 60th anniversary of his assassination, just 2 days away, as you mentioned. So it's a timely occurrence to have this conversation with you and I. And hopefully we do justice to what is a very complex topic. Incredibly fascinating, but I think we'll give it a good go tonight.
Although you say complex, but I think it's simpler than we think. And I think, now, for the audience's sake here, and I guess for mine, you're going to be more of the conspiracy side of things in this discussion, right? And I'm going to be more of the Oswald did it side of things. Now, my story with JFK is I saw the movie JFK. So moving on. No, I did more than that. I saw the movie JFK. Now, I remember when it came out, I was, I don't know, probably 12, 13, 14, somewhere in that area there. And I remember a lot of stuff on television about it, a lot of controversy over it, news reports, this, that, and the other thing, documentaries and this, that. And I found it fascinating. The Zapruder, you know, I don't know if a 12-year-old should be seeing the Zapruder film, but I did. And it didn't occur to me that it was, you know, it's for whatever reason, it didn't seem like it was a person, you know, because it was from way back when. And it was almost cartoonish to me. It wasn't real at that time. And so, I don't know, the movie came out 10 or so years later. I'm in college. And I see him, you know, buying some DVDs, and there's JFK, the director's cut. So I'm like, oh, let me get this, see what it's all about. And I was like, I called my friend. I was like, Pete, you got to watch JFK. It's amazing. Like, you know, guns everywhere and this, that, you know, and at that age, you believe it. So I we got very heavily into the JFK conspiracy stuff. And I mean, remember The Men Who Killed Kennedy? That like multi-part documentary. I think the BBC did it, or it was a British something or other. There was that, and there were just so many of them, right? And somewhere along the line, I guess as I got into my 30s, I don't remember exactly when, but I realized, like, I don't like being played somebody's fool. Like, I don't want to be somebody else's fool. I'll be a fool for myself all the time. I have no problem doing that. But I don't want to be fooled by somebody else. So I said, well, let me see what the Oswald did it side says. Because I've only heard what they say through the conspiracy theorists. And I read a book by Gerald Posner called Case Closed. And it is aptly named because it closed the case for me. I suddenly was like, you know what? I think the guy did it. And one of the things I noticed, the stark difference that I noticed with that book versus anything else that I've read or seen with that argued for conspiracy, was actual evidence, not partial evidence with a raised eyebrow, but actual documentation that, you know, just goes on for miles. And that kind of changed. And also, as I got older, I realized, you know, most things in life are very simple and very simply explained, especially when you start to learn about the characters involved. And if you have any basic understanding of human nature, it's easier to not fall for grandiose stories. And so I am 98% certain Oswald did it. I'll always leave a little room for doubt, because after all, we are dealing with the government, and I understand the lack of trust that people have in it. Believe me, I have it too. But I think, you know, as far as the government fabricating things, evidence, in order to bolster that story, somewhere along the line, they had to have had so much forethought to be involved in this conspiracy to assassinate Kennedy that they would have thought, okay, well, what about birth certificate? What about all of his records in the Marine Corps? Like, what if he really was a bad shot? Well, we got to make it look like he scored high on the range. And, just every little thing they have to go. It's so much work. It requires so many people before the fact. And that I just, they can't run the DMV. And how could they possibly do all of that? But I always leave room to be convinced. And so I'm hoping that maybe you can convince me that there was a vast conspiracy today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what we want from you is participation. You can comment all you like, but I always say this if you watch the show a lot, we have the phone lines up. We want to hear from you. This is too big of a topic to just go off of comments. So you can have fun in the comment section, but we will not be reading them today. No, we want to hear your voice. We want you to come in with your theories. We want you to come in with any questions you may have. If you want to challenge something that we're asserting, by all means, call in and do it. But call in, be a part of the show, have a little fun with us, and stretch the old brain muscles out there. Okay, but you got a while before we're going to take calls. So let's start here now, Jen. What do you want to start with? Let's
start with books.
Okay.
Because you've already mentioned the case closed.
Yeah.
So maybe we can set that up as a little bit of a point of departure.
Go ahead.
By one account, estimates about 1,000 books have been written on the assassination. About 1,000. So it's, it's certainly a popular topic to be written on. And
that's less than I would imagine.
It was surprising to me, too. Yeah. And I think about the books written on Gettysburg.
It's like 50,000?
It's like
100?
It's like 18,000.
18,000.
That's been written on the Battle of Gettysburg. So I was a little maybe underwhelmed that there's only maybe somewhere around 1,000 books written on the assassination. And of that, about 95% of them are pro-conspiracy. So if you want to get into reading on the assassination, you're reading the anti-Warren Commission point of view. You're reading the conspiratorial arguments.
That's a lot.
It is.
That's a lot.
And the other thing I think is interesting about this, and I'm playing the role tonight as the conspiracy advocate.
Right. The actual bona fide historian, by the way.
That's what's interesting, right? I'm the trained academic historian with a PhD in history who privileges methodology and looking at evidence, and facts and putting together an argument. So this will be a fun intellectual exercise. As a tangent to that, most of the books, like overwhelmingly, historians have avoided the topic of the Kennedy assassination. Yeah. So all those 1,000-some books, they're written by lawyers, they're written by journalists, they're written by amateurs or any sort of, hackneyed sort of person with a pen and a typewriter.
Right.
They're not written by historians. So if you want to read on this topic, and I think that spins a lot of this discussion about conspiracy theories because you don't have an academically trained historian sifting through evidence.
Yeah.
And that matters when you're talking about something with this magnitude of the Kennedy.
But I remember when I was into it all, Mark Lane, for example, who in my mind, together with Marguerite Oswald, started the whole cottage industry of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, the Mark Lane book, I wanted to double check this. That came out in 1966.
Yeah. Barely after, the body's not even cold.
2 years after the Warren Commission report. And if y'all in the comments are interested about that or you're dropping book titles or somewhere, that book is called Rush to Judgment.
Yes.
By Mark Lane. And the title of it tells you everything that you can need to know about the thesis of the book, right? He's very much, you're right, started that cottage industry.
Yeah. But he was a lawyer.
He was a lawyer.
And so I remember in my conspiracy theory days when I heard that whoever was telling me there was a conspiracy was a lawyer by trade, like Jim Garrison, district attorney of Orleans Parish. Okay, well, this is a lawyer. They know how to research.
Right, marshal evidence.
Yeah.
And put together a case.
Right. Mm-hmm. But then I learned that lawyers also are really good spin doctors, and they have to be creative to argue their point. Mm-hmm. And often they go in with a conclusion already in mind, and they make the evidence fit their conclusion.
Sure. And deliberately neglect evidence.
Right.
Which a historian would not do.
Correct. And I find, and Posner makes this point in Case Closed, over and over and over again, no matter which conspiracy theorist he cites, he says, Mark Lane says so-and-so said such and such and such. But what he omits is prior to that, they said, whatever, that completely negates what they just said.
Yeah.
And it happens far too often, I think, with conspiracy theorists because it has to.
Right.
Because they have, see, it's funny because I'm starting to come to the conclusion that everything they accuse the government and the Warren Commission of doing, they're actually doing.
Right. Deliberate negligence.
Yes.
And Lane was the first advocate of that, to take the Warren Commission to task for deliberately ignoring evidence, deliberately not interviewing witnesses, right? Deliberately manipulating evidence. And you're certainly right? You pick and choose to make the particular case that you want. But
I think it's important to note, though, he got involved with the whole case because he represented Marguerite Oswald, or Lee Oswald, through his mother, Marguerite.
Okay.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. So she retained him very quickly after Lee was killed.
So he was the lawyer for Lee Harvey Oswald?
Essentially Marguerite Oswald, because Lee was dead, right? And they were trying to make the case that it's not fair to say that Lee did it because he's dead. He didn't have a trial. There needs to be a trial, blah, 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 blah. And then his mother, a lot of this stuff that you hear later, especially coming from Jim Garrison, about Oswald being an agent for the CIA, it comes from his mother. She made those wacky claims like days after the assassination. Her son was barely in the ground, and she's making these claims. She was a nut.
So I'm curious, before we move too far beyond books written, what is the best book that you would recommend then on the Kennedy assassination? Because you have to sift through a lot of crap, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of shoddy work to really get to something that's credible and well researched.
Are you talking conspiracy or
in general,
either way?
Kennedy assassination period? Is it the Posner book?
I would say, I think a lot of people who are pro Oswald would say that the Posner book is like the authority still on the pro Oswald side. I know there's been some others that have come out. To be honest, I haven't touched JFK in like 20 years. So I was preparing for this. I texted you and I said, so I'm watching JFK, getting ready, and you were watching it at the same time. And then I went on and I watched a couple of documentaries, and I've been listening to Posner's book on Audible since we came up with the idea in August. And so, yeah, I mean, I would recommend people start with that. But also, like a year or two ago, I listened to the Warren Commission on Audible.
Jesus.
It took me a year, because I didn't listen every day, but I would be cooking or doing something around the house and I'd have it on, and it's very dry.
That's a commitment.
Yeah. It was very kind of casual because I wasn't planning on doing this. So, I didn't have a purpose for it, but it was very dry. But I thought it was important to listen to that because that is the catalyst for Mark Lane's book. And then that is the catalyst for Jim Garrison starting all of his shenanigans in 68, 67, 68, somewhere around there. So it's important to see what caused the hubbub afterwards, in my mind. And it was interesting to me because I never read it before. Again, any evidence that I have coming from the government prior to a few years ago was through the filter of a conspiracy theorist. And so when I actually was able to read the Warren Commission's own words, I found that a lot of the claims that I believed as a conspiracy theorist were just untrue, that they didn't thoroughly investigate conspiracy, or that they wouldn't talk to certain witnesses. Posner goes into this. In fact, I was just listening to the chapter today. The witnesses who claim that there were shots from the grassy knoll. Many of it, what was her name? Jean. Oh, Mary Mormon's friend, Jean. I forget her name. Jean Hill. I think it's Jean Hill. But she's the woman who's wearing the red. Okay. Clearly visible in the Zapruder film. Claimed several different things, but the day of the assassination, she talked to the sheriff and gave a statement, and it didn't mention anything about the grassy knoll, didn't mention anything about gun smoke on the grassy knoll. She had mentioned something about how the Kennedys, she wanted them to look to her so that she and her friend could take a picture, but they were busy looking at a little dog that was in between them. And then later she was questioned again by somebody else, I think the Warren Commission, and they said there was no dog there. She goes, oh, it must have been the roses, the white roses. And they go, well, the roses were red. And then she goes, well, maybe it was nothing. There was no dog. There were no roses. And so like the stories changed. And then people who were on the overpass claim they saw something. A lot of people talk about smoke. A little fact that some people don't realize is that when Oliver Stone made JFK, he could not find a rifle and its corresponding round that would make enough smoke to show up on camera because we use smokeless powder now. And so, and not only that, it's not like firing a musket where it's a big cloud of white smoke and it just kind of hangs. Or if there's wind, the wind will blow this big white cloud of smoke. There was a wind coming from I believe the northeast that day, and it was a pretty substantial, it wasn't a constant wind, but there were gusts. So any smoke from a smokeless powder weapon would blow away very quickly. And so what they had to do in the movie JFK to make it register on film was have a prop guy there with a bellows blowing smoke. So, I guess my point is that the Warren Commission did follow any leads that they did have that pointed to a conspiracy, but didn't find it. And I think at the heart of every conspiracy theorist is this refusal to believe that a loser like Oswald could take out the most powerful man in the world. But that is exactly how history works. You know, it's the guy you least expect. Still waters run deep, you know, like he's sitting there, oh, you're just a loser. Those guys are the ones that do the worst things. They do the most damage.
Well, I think it's important, since we've been talking about the roots of the conspiracies, to just kind of sit on that for a second, that they've got long origins. The Warren Commission report is released in 1964. People start writing on this in 1966. Now, we're conditioned in 2023 to be critical of everything. We have conspiracy theories about September 11th. We're
immediately.
Right. In the aftermath, we're just hypercritical to government today. But in 1966, that's not the case.
Right.
This is pre-Watergate. This is pre-fiasco in Vietnam. So this is still relatively Kennedy's Camelot. You have a lot of social unrest with the civil rights movement and some of that discontent, particularly in the American South, but the escalating of the Cold War. But by and large, this is a generation that is more, I don't want to say homogenous, but not quite as prone as we are today to be dismissive and critical. But the fact that they're starting to question the Warren Commission report so quickly does suggest that people are not convinced uniformly that Oswald acted alone. And I would maybe insert here, when we talk about conspiracy, it doesn't have to be grandiose comments of cover-ups and that, you know, the man really didn't land on the moon and Elvis is still alive sort of things, which are incredibly far-fetched.
Well, Elvis is still alive, but yeah, the rest of it's crazy.
Veronica will tell us she's in Memphis. Look for him. A conspiracy is defined simply by a plan of two or more people to commit an unlawful, harmful, or treacherous act. A conspiracy is simply a plan with two or more people to commit an unlawful, harmful, or treacherous act. So all that means is Oswald plus. Oswald plus, right? It
plus one. It could be one.
It doesn't mean that the government uniformly is involved, you know, widespread with thousands of agents acting in some clandestine manner. It just needs to mean plus one more. So conspiracy is kind of a low, maybe a low benchmark, right? So the people that embrace conspiracy, if you can just prove or put forth evidence that it's Oswald plus something, you've met that threshold then. And that is why so many of these theories gain ground, because there is so much uncertain evidence and conflicting evidence. And we're going to talk about Oswald. This is an incredibly fascinating individual whose background raises a lot of questions for people who he associated with, raises a lot of questions for people. And when you can start poking just those tiny holes in the lone gunman theory, right, that makes this an intellectual, fascinating question. But I do agree with you too, Matt, just thinking that one single person can assassinate Kennedy. And we look at this in 2023, 60 years later. What if, right? We like these what if questions. What we do at Gettysburg all the time. What if Jackson? Right. What if? Because we know what comes later. Kennedy said that he was going to withdraw troops from South Vietnam. He says that in September of 1963 when Walter Cronkite interviews him at Hyannisport. He's going to start withdrawing out of Vietnam. Well, Kennedy's assassinated. What if he would have stayed in, been reelected in 64? What would have happened to those 58,000 Americans who were killed in Vietnam? What would have happened in 1968 and such, like Khe Sanh and the My Lai massacre, right?
There's so much trauma that comes after he dies. Like, he's killed, which is a trauma. And then Vietnam happens, which is a bigger trauma. And you're right.
Civil rights movement, the unrest in the American South, the Voting Rights Act, the March to Selma.
It's a turbulent time.
It's an incredibly turbulent time. The assassinations that come in 1968 with Martin Luther King, his brother Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X. The 60s, 1960s, like our 1860s, are incredibly volatile. Right? Incredibly volatile. So you look at, for me at least, looking at Kennedy, and you showed that clip on your intro, just... These are beautiful people. Right.
By 60 standards, yes.
Come on.
No. They're attractive people, of course.
Are they still attractive? They're incredibly beautiful people, right? The kids, young John and Caroline, right? It's this age of innocence. He's the youngest president in American history to be elected. He's suave. He's charismatic. He encourages Americans to do the unthinkable, like go to the moon. That's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And Americans consume that with an insatiable appetite. So to think that some crackpot, singular individual who's disillusioned with America, has a failed career in many avenues, can just mail order a rifle and climb up to the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository and then irrevocably rape that innocence from our nation is really powerful.
Good choice of words there, because you're right.
Right?
It's what it is.
It feels like something was
because he was an aspirational guy.
Like stolen from us. As those three shots ring out, America's collective innocence is stolen. And
my father, I remember talking to my father many times about this over the years, and he always says when he looks back on that day, from that moment on, nothing was ever the same in the country. The mood soured, everything. And now I look at 9/11 that way. I trace all the misery we have today to 9/11 in my mind. I don't know historically if that's correct, but in my mind, that's where the demarcation line is. And I think for the Kennedy assassination generation, that's that moment for them as well.
They knew where they were, right?
Because nothing seemed to get better after that. It took like 20 years for things to get a little better.
LBJ followed by Nixon. I mean, it is really a pattern of like turmoil and unrest. And that's one of those benchmark moments where people would remember where they were at when they heard Walter Cronkite, America's
most trusted man in America.
Right, absolutely. Announcing that the president had died at 108 in Dallas, Texas.
The worst is when he gets choked up. Yeah. It's like, I hate watching grown men cry. I can't take it. It kills me. Let's talk about Oswald.
Let's talk about
the man, the myth, the asshole. All right, so Oswald, I find him to be very interesting. And it wasn't until, again, I read Gerald Posner's book, and he goes into Oswald. It takes forever for him to get to the assassination in that book because he gives you background on the principles. And Oswald and his mother, because of his mother, in my estimation, is a lunatic. And she he had a very rough upbringing. His father died while he was in the womb. His mother was married, all these other people, not many of them, but, she had a couple of other marriages and they weren't any good. She was very hard to live with. That's part of the reason why they didn't last. Oswald and his brothers, he had a whole brother, full brother, whatever you call it, and a half brother. And the brothers were put in a home because she couldn't handle all of them, financially. And then Oswald was with an aunt, and then she had a house. The mother had a house, and she let people live in the house if they could watch Lee. But she found out they were abusing him because one of the neighbors said, when you're not here and he's there, like I hear him screaming all the time. And then she came home like one day to surprise him, and there were welts on his leg, and so she kicked him out of the house and everything, which was good on her part. But there was an unnatural closeness between his mother and him. His mother spoiled him, but he was naturally a solitary boy. He didn't socialize. He didn't have interest in friends, and I guess maybe if you want to get Freudian with the mother and everything, but we don't need to do that. But he did not have a good upbringing.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not one of these people that's like, well, he didn't have a good upbringing, so he could do whatever the hell he wants and cause as much damage as he wants, and he's okay. We'll pat him on the head. I'm not like that. But I do believe that, we are the product of our lives, of our experiences. And so as he gets older into puberty and high school and everything, he kind of, wants to be somebody, and he joins the Marines. I think partially to get away from his mother, but I think also because he thinks he might be somebody.
Isn't his brother a Marine too?
His brother was.
Robert is.
Yes.
He's sort of
follows in his footsteps.
Inspired by that. Right?
Yeah.
So he's 19 and joins the Marines in
something like that.
1959.
And I think before that.
Sorry, 1956.
I think before that, he was also he did the Civil Air Patrol. So he was trying to get involved in things like that. And it was during his time in the Marines, I believe, where he got into Marxism. And, but the other Marines, they joshed him. They teased him. They thought he was weird. He couldn't fit in there. He had the same training as all these guys, yet he still can't fit in. And a lot of the reason why I couldn't fit in was because he would say outrageous things. Like he invented the question mark or something. Not exactly that. That's from Austin Powers. But he would say outrageous things to get attention. A lot of the guys that they interviewed who knew him in the Marines, felt like he was just saying these things to get attention, and, they didn't appreciate it. So now what is he? He's 24, I think, when he kills Kennedy. So he does a lot of living in 18 to 24.
So before you move on from that, in the Marines, and this maybe helps your argument a little bit, he has a couple incidents where he's in the Marine Corps. Let me be sure. He's court-martialed for having an illegal weapon, and then he, at another point, gets into some kind of row with his commanding officer in a bar or restaurant, and he throws the drink over his head. And sort of a fit of like an outburst, and then he is discharged from the Marine Corps. So what I think this will demonstrate, and this will be more to your point, I guess, than mine, but he has a period of volatile behavior, right? Trying to do things and how he sort of deals with adversity or setbacks. But that to say, he doesn't leave the Marine Corps with a stellar and untarnished record, right? So he comes out with some question marks in his personality, but that doesn't draw a direct line to being an assassin, right?
No.
So you can document all you want about people's backgrounds, but doesn't mean he's going to kill the president of the United States. Exactly,
because there's plenty of people who are very similar to him who've never killed anybody. So
you can hope. Right.
The vast majority of people who are like him have never killed anybody.
Yes.
Maybe they've beaten a spouse or something, but they've never killed anybody.
Right, or you think about it, right? Oh.
What, think about killing somebody?
Maybe.
Well, maybe they do. Who knows? But they don't. That's the point.
Right.
They don't do it. So then he's fascinated with, communism. And, he just clearly feels that he just can't make it here in our system. And so he defects and he goes over to the Soviet Union. Now, it's interesting when he's over in the Soviet Union because he thinks he's special. And for a while, he's treated that way.
And think about that, too, right? He defects in 1962, or he's living over there in 61 and 62. Just what a decision that is, with this clear binary world of communism, anti-communism, containment. It's very clear in the Cold War. Kennedy's rhetoric about stopping the spread of communism. We've lived with this rhetoric since the Second World War's closure in 1945. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. So his decision to defect to the Soviet Union is momentous. It's not like moving to Australia.
It might as well move to the moon.
Or Canada, right? This is a big decision to move and defect. And then try to get citizenship, right? It's not as if he's just going to have this little lark over there. He applies for citizenship and it is denied. And then he tries, as his response to that, right? This is when he slits his wrist and tries to commit suicide.
Yeah. But before all that, though, while he's waiting, at first, I forget where is he first?
Minsk.
I thought he's transferred to Minsk.
He's in Minsk until 1962.
And then he goes where? He was in one...
He's somewhere else before he goes to Minsk.
Okay, so Minsk is where he ended up, and he hated it because he had a job as a factory worker.
In a radio factory.
Yeah, and nobody cared. Yeah. Like, the first place he was at, they're like, oh, the American. They're like, oh, so fascinated with him, and he loved it because he wanted to be somebody. And then he goes to Minsk, and he's a factory worker like everybody else, and he has, like, this crappy apartment. He doesn't like the food. He doesn't like how everything you need permission to do, it takes forever to get the permission. You got to sit there and wait and go fill out forms and everything like that. And he's very disenchanted with the system that he previously idolized. Yeah. Excuse me. And so, but he's trying to be a citizen, though. He's still trying to do it.
He meets his
and he meets Marina. Now, okay, so this is a good one because Marina, the conspiracy theorists say that, the ones who believe that the KGB has something to do with it, that Marina's uncle is, some like mid-level KGB guy, like a colonel or something in the KGB. He's a local police officer. Okay, but for some reason, I don't know how it got there to the KGB, but he is a government guy, but on like a municipal level. Okay. So he meets Marina and they begin their relationship.
They have a child, June. The daughter is born in the Soviet Union.
I mean, really, in such a short amount of time, so much happens in this guy's life.
Right, and he's in his early 20s, which is a formative period in your life. Your frontotemporal part of your brain is not fully developed, right? He's experiencing a lot of the world.
Yeah, and then so now you mentioned he slits his wrists. Or not, you mentioned it before, but now let's get to that. So is it that I can't remember. Do they reject him or is he just getting impatient? Oh, they rejected him and then
he's denied his citizenship.
Right.
And then he's frustrated with that. And then that's when he slits his wrist.
His handler goes to get him
a visa, right?
Right.
He gets a visa to work over there. I think initially he's granted like a 6-day kind of residency. He gets his work visa. He's in the factory that we talked about. And then he's applying for citizenship and they say no. And then that's when he attempts suicide by slitting his wrist. So he has these experiences of setback or failure, and he overreacts to the setback or failure for a show of attention, right? Or some sort of...
But yeah, I mean, because, you get attention. And now let's go back to when he's a kid. He would throw temper tantrums. Actually, I have some here. Let me see if I can find it without wasting too much time here. And it was when he was a kid, and I'm talking like teenager. Here, I think I'm almost at it now. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So in his early teens, according to Mrs. Evans, who I believe was a neighbor, and she was friends with Marguerite Oswald, his mother. Quote, he would come home and he would get his books and his music. And then when he wanted supper or something to eat, he would scream like a bull. He would holler, "Ma, where's my supper?" Her whole life was wrapped up in that boy and she spoiled him to death. Lee was about 13 at the time. The main thing, now that was the quote, and then here, the main thing that seems to stand out in his conduct was the way he demanded to be fed when he would come home from school. I'm sorry, this is still part of the quote. Margie that's the mother, would be downstairs maybe, talking to me or something, and he would come to the head of the stairs and yell for her to come up and fix him something to eat. He would just stand up there and yell, "Ma, how about fixing me something to eat?" And she would jump up right away and go running upstairs to get something for him. So when he wants attention, he will be extreme in order to get it, because his mother doted on him. She had a hand in creating this monster. And so now, of course, so when he goes to the Soviet Union, he doesn't get his way, he slits his wrists. Probably, I'm going to guess, not correctly to do the job. It was more of an attention getter than anything else, but he does it. Now, I can't remember, though, what happens. I mean, obviously, they take him to the hospital, but when does he get back to the United States?
And maybe we should double check the chronology, or someone on Wikipedia can do it, but that might be when he's granted the work visa then. Because
they're like, okay, let's get this guy working. But later on, though, the KGB, like afterwards, members of the KGB who were aware of him because, he's over there, they didn't for a minute take this guy seriously. And I think it's important to also note that our CIA and the FBI, who did have files on him and did have dealings with him, also didn't take him seriously as an operative for them. He was too much of a loose cannon. They're not going to get a guy like Oswald. He's a loser. And, sorry, but he's a loser. Everything he tries, he fails at. And I think that's an important thing to understand if you're going to have an open mind and hear the Oswald did it by himself argument. Because that, to me, that's all you need, is to understand the man and look at the different events in his life. They progressively get worse. So he leaves his native land for their enemy, is disenchanted with that. It's not the worker's paradise he thought. It's misery. And he comes back. Is there anything you want to add before he comes back?
I think that's good. Just maybe to underscore again about this notion of defecting and what a big deal that is in 1960, 61, 62 America.
Now, here's a question I have. And I know I heard or read the answer before, but I don't remember what it is. Maybe you would remember. You defect to another country. Now, he doesn't become a citizen, right? Does he renounce his citizenship here?
I don't believe so. And the Soviet Union won't grant him citizenship.
Right. So how common, though? Well, maybe that's not the right question. Not how common is it for someone to defect to the Soviet Union and then be welcomed back here or allowed back here? But sometimes the conspiracy theorists will point to the fact that he was able to come back as evidence of him being an agent for the CIA. And I believe Posner addresses this, and I don't remember the finer points of this argument here because there's a lot in that book. But I want to say it wasn't uncommon for people to think they want to go there and then come back and be like, yeah, that wasn't that great. And so they would be allowed back. But they would be watched. There were many people that the FBI and CIA have files on who did exactly what Oswald did, except they didn't kill the president. And that's why it's significant to conspiracy theorists that Oswald has these files and that they were aware of him. But he's one of dozens from, let's say, that 1 year. So again, when you look further into the things and you're like, okay, well then, yeah, that's not as exciting as it was before when I thought it was a conspiracy. So, okay, he comes back. His brother picks him up at the airport. You know what he says to his brother? Where are all the reporters?
Yeah, okay. There's a scene in that 11/22/63 that we were talking about on Hulu, where he comes back and expects that there's going to be this grand ceremony for something that he thought was kind of remarkable.
Right.
He did, right? Defected or tried to, establish residency over there and came back and wanted the attention for it and was frustrated that he wasn't.
Nobody cared.
Yeah, he wasn't by CBS News, and Cronkite wasn't at the terminal to greet him.
So he's back to no fanfare, and now he has to make a living. He's got a wife and baby in tow.
Right.
And he's got to make a living and support them.
Yep.
And he goes all over the place. He's in New Orleans, Dallas, right?
Yeah. And he was born in New Orleans, so he has the connection there.
His aunt.
Yes. He's trying to get work, sort of setback. And then, do you want to jump to Cuba? He turns his attention to our other cold power enemy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is Cuba, right? I think in early 1963, he starts to flirt with attention in Cuba.
Mm-hmm. Goes to Mexico City.
He does.
To the Cuban embassy.
So this is, right, a lot of mysterious behavior and connections, though, do fuel these conspiracy theories.
Absolutely.
Going to Cuba in early 1963, Fidel Castro, Cuban Missile Crisis, y'all remembers October of 1962, the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in April of 61. So this is a hot area in the Cold War. So now you have him turning his attention there is, for the conspiracy theories, further evidence that he's trying to make some kind of connections there.
Now, I think what he's really thinking is Soviet-style communism is not for him. And when he comes back, he does some television and radio interviews in, I want to say they're in New Orleans. And he is asked, "Are you a communist?" And he says, "No, sir, I'm not a communist. I'm a Marxist-Leninist." And the guy says, "Well, what's the difference?" And he explains it that, a communist is a whole way of life. And he goes, but, we have countries like the UK with their socialized medicine. That's an element of Marxism. And so, Marxist-Leninist, it's like some of it and, a little bit of it here is okay. It's basically what he's saying there. So now he's changed, if he ever was calling himself a communist, which I believe he was always calling himself a Marxist-Leninist. But either way, he has gone on the record and established what exactly he is. And he doesn't really like the Soviet style of communism. And I think he's thinking, maybe Cuba does it better. At least they have warm beaches.
Cigars.
And cigars, right. So he goes to Mexico. Go ahead.
So I was just going to add a couple things to that. The motive question is going to be interesting, and we can come back to that ultimately when we dive more into this. But, I mean, is he killing Kennedy because he's frustrated with Kennedy's policies on communism? What is the motive then? And is he ideologically motivated? What's he taking from all of these countries? What's he taking out from Russia? What's he taking out with Cuba? He's involved with that Fair Play for Cuba committee while he's in New Orleans. What's he gaining from that? What is he taking away that ultimately is going to manifest itself into killing the president of the United States?
I think they're completely unrelated. And I hope to prove that as we go along, because there's a lot to unpack there.
Do you want to do the Edwin Walker bit?
Okay, that was part of it. All right, so, Edwin Walker, radical right-wing retired general, I believe, or he was forced to retire.
Yeah, strong anti-communist, very vociferous anti-communist.
I think he was fired for handing out John Bircher Society material to his troops.
Oh.
I believe. Don't quote me on that. But that's how he's a far right guy. Okay. Oswald knows where he lives, finds out where he lives. He has his new Mannlicher Carcano that he got out of a catalog, and he's going to go and assassinate him. And he goes to his house. Walker is in his study, office, whatever, with nice big window, lights on.
Isn't he doing his taxes?
He's doing his taxes.
It's
April.
Yeah, such an American
yeah,
thing
right.
to be doing. I'm assassinated. I'm doing my taxes.
So he's sitting there at his desk. A shot comes through the window. The glass deflects the path of the bullet and it misses him. He gets some glass shards on his face and stuff. But survives. He's not hit. Oswald doesn't wait to see if he hit him. He assumes he hit him and he runs. I think he hides the gun in a bush or something like that, which he'll later go and retrieve. But the next morning he gets up and he sees the newspaper and he's all excited to read it, and he's completely disappointed because he failed. And Marina now realizes by his reaction that he's the guy who did it. But Marina's afraid of the police. She's not going to call the police because her experience with the police in Soviet Russia is not very good.
Going to the gulag.
Right. And so she's like, I don't know, she's not touching it. So essentially he gets away with it. They don't put the 2 and 2 together until after Kennedy is assassinated. But my thing is, maybe ideologically, he's obviously opposed to Walker. But he thinks that this is going to score him points with domestic communist groups. So you mentioned the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and some other communist groups in the United States who he writes to. He started writing to them as a teenager. And it's almost like a child writing to Santa Claus. The way when you read them, the mindset that he has is so naive and idealistic and kind of delusional. And people from these different organizations were interviewed afterwards, and they, like the FBI and the CIA and the KGB, said, we weren't interested in this guy at all. He was a little weird. He was weird for communists. They'll take anybody. And he was too weird for them. And I think those are important points. He could not find his tribe. And that's a very important thing for a person to have. And the longer they go without it, and especially when they really have this desire to be somebody, and you can't find a group to be somebody in that'll prop you up, that's you become very despondent and desperate. And I think he didn't really care. It could have been Walker. It could have been some other right-wing politician or whoever. It didn't matter. He had the opportunity and the plan to get Walker. He planned it out for a while. And that was his attempt to make a name for himself.
So what the conspiracy argument would say about the Walker attempted assassination is it's evidence of failure. So when you have a sitting target in the kitchen or his den sitting, and your gunman shoots and misses the stationary target, how do you then say that same gunman hit a moving target and the fatal shot from the 6th floor of the school book depository he hits? So
by the way,
that he misses Walker fuels the question that the fatal shot, at least if not others, were fired only and exclusively from Oswald and that Mannlicher Carcano.
If the conspiracy theorists mention that incident at all, I didn't learn about the Walker thing until I read Case Closed. When I was consuming conspiracy stuff, I never heard of that once. And since learning about it through Case Closed, I would hear once in a while I would hear a conspiracy theorist argument. And you're right. That's their argument, is that it proves that he wasn't a good shot. But there's a lot of things that I think those of us who have never actually tried to do that don't take into consideration. Nerves are a big one. And I don't care what his training was. This isn't a battlefield. This is an innocent man sitting in his home, and you're in a neighborhood. It's not like he's out on some ranch in the middle of nowhere where your nearest neighbor's 20 miles away. You're in a neighborhood, so someone can see you, someone can drive by, a cop can drive by, there's a lot of things going on. And in his mind, so much for himself is riding on this working. So I could see a lot of nerves there. Also,
he wants the notoriety of assassinating Walker as a way to be included into these ultra
you have
right-wing ideologues.
Not to be included with them. To
be included with the communists, right? Not Walker, I'm sorry, right? Not them. He wants the notoriety to belong to them. And then if he does kill Walker, that's going to be his inclusion into this group of people, plus the fact that he's going to be sitting in jail.
Right. Well, we have to remember that we're dealing with a delusional and irrational mind. He is not a sane person. And this is 6 months before he kills Kennedy. So, you got to think like everything is escalating in his mind. Like his mentality, his psyche is deteriorating because he's going to get to an even more desperate and grandiose thing in about 5-6 months. And so we're not dealing with a sane, rational mind. So it doesn't make sense to us, but it makes sense to him. Mm-hmm. And again, this is my hunch. We never got to interview the guy, so we don't really know. But from what people around him who witnessed his behavior at this time, Ruth Payne, you familiar with that name?
Did she rent the boarding house to him?
No, she was the woman who took Marina and the kids in while he was trying to find work in New Orleans and other places in Dallas. She's the one who got him the job at the book depository. She knew somebody, and they said that they had a job. Oh, you should talk to Lee. And then that's the thing there. Now, so, she has given a lot of interviews over the years, and she comments on Oswald's demeanor and mentality and everything like that. And it's evident as you get closer and closer to the assassination day, he's getting more desperate and a little crazier. He's cruel to Marina more often. Just not a nice guy, not a guy you want to be around. So that's my guess. My theory is that he wants to be somebody, and this Walker is an opportunity to be somebody. He doesn't care if he's going to be in jail because everyone will know his name. Yeah,
and I maybe just here interject again to remind us that the conspiracy theory is just Oswald plus. So I think we could probably both agree about Oswald's background, as a lot of the conspiracy theories would. But it's not to say that he didn't have a role, but it's him plus. So this background can set the stage for ultimately a point of departure for both the conspiracy and the lone gunman.
Sure.
Sort of argument.
But who would let's say it's one other person, not an institution, not an organization or anything. One other person. Who would that be? So
I'm glad you asked that. When we were talking about scholars earlier, Vincent
Bugliosi, yeah.
Is a really prominent scholar on this topic. He's also a lawyer, I think.
He tried. Who did he try? Manson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, a person of renown.
Yes.
Like we could a stature, we could say. He has a bit in his introduction. He says that the conspiracy theories pose no more than 214 people possible to be associating with Oswald. 42 different groups or organizations. Mm-hmm. So 42 different groups and organizations, and at least 214 people have been accused or pointed at some time by some conspiracy
including
theory.
Jack Ruby
and Lyndon Johnson. Mm-hmm. I mean, these numbers and names and personalities can stretch from the small and insignificant the whole way up the hierarchy of the United States government. So
let's take the Jack Ruby connection. In the movie JFK, they really, they've got Oswald, partying with Jack Ruby and Clay Shaw and David Ferry and Kevin Bacon. And the thing is, the Warren Commission tried to find a connection between Ruby and Oswald and could not find a connection between Ruby and Oswald.
So they did not meet prior.
They correct. Well, no, not necessarily a meeting, but people in common. They couldn't. So in other words, they couldn't find
some sort of.
Well, because the theory is that Ruby was a mob hitman,
right? Who
had to get rid of the patsy,
right? To take
Oswald. Yeah, but they couldn't find a connection to Oswald and the mob. Ruby, the best connection he had to the mob. And I got some stuff here on Ruby. Actually, he's a very interesting guy, but we'll get to him when it's when he comes into the timeline. But his connections to the mob were basically not to piss them off so that he could continue running his clubs without them doing some kind of shenanigans.
An important connection, right?
Yeah.
Continue
but as
your
far as being
empire.
a soldier for the mob, he was not. Because like Oswald, the mafia, like some mobsters who had been interviewed, since, said that that Ruby was also too much of a volatile, loose cannon type that they wouldn't involve themselves with. So, so I don't believe that there was a connection there. In fact, when we get into Jack Ruby, I think that'll make a lot more sense. But yeah, so I think, you could say, because this is the other thing. Now, what is it the conspiracy theorists say about his getting that job at the school book depository right before the parade? Not right before, but a month or so before.
That he's in the position.
Right. Like, in other words,
he has the access to the building where he can be planted.
Right. He's placed there.
Right.
Right.
To make the shots. Right, on that motorcade route that never should have been approved because of the hairpin turn that comes by the library.
So that would mean that Ruth Payne is at least unwittingly involved in the conspiracy because she got on the job. But you got to think, Ruth Payne is giving shelter to his essentially single mother wife who he can't support, who now has a baby and a baby on the way, because she has another baby right before the assassination. So he can't find gainful employment. So she said to Marina, you can stay as long as you need to, as long as you like. She was apparently a very nice, welcoming woman. But now you'd have to think then that she's involved in this because she's the one who facilitated him getting that job. And he got the job before the parade route was announced. And not just announced, but planned. So that's some pretty good guesswork on the CIA and the other conspirators who put him in that building. Well, and not only that, but the company had 2 locations. And he could have been placed in either one. And they decided that he was qualified to be a clerk in the school book depository. And that's why he got that job there.
Well, no doubt the conspiracy theories range the gamut from, okay, like reasonable doubt, right? Isn't that what we rest our criminal justice system on, is reasonable doubt?
Yep.
To absolutely farcical, ridiculous, right? So there's a whole gamut of them with any number of people being involved at any kind of level. So do you want to talk about the day itself then?
Yeah, let's get to the day, because this is the fun stuff.
Right.
Okay. So the day.
November 22nd, 1963.
Go ahead. Start it.
So what does Oswald do that morning, right? He gets up with the intention to commit a crime, to assassinate the president of the United States. Does he leave a note, I think, a brief note for Marina, and he takes his wedding ring off as he walks out the door?
Takes his wedding ring off, leaves money for her, says take as much as you need.
On the dresser or whatever.
Yep.
And goes to work.
Well, he goes to work, but the guy's name escapes me, but he had been getting rides to work from a guy who lives in the neighborhood. And they both work there. And this day, the guy, I wish I could remember his name, but the guy was interviewed later, and he said that Lee showed up with a package that was brown paper,
right?
And who said, "What's that?" And he goes, "It's curtains for my apartment," which was bull because his apartment was curtained.
And why would you take him to work?
Right. Well, excuse me. It was something like he stayed the weekend at Ruth Payne's, but he lived in a different part of town during the week. So this was a Friday. And I guess I can't remember those details. It's not important. But anyway, the package was ostensibly the rifle. And now there's the conspiracy theorists hone in on the estimated guess as to how long this package was. Now, come on. Who the hell? It's not like the guy took out a ruler and measured it, right? He estimates, it's about 2 feet long, and then somebody else sees it later and they're like, this is about, 38 inches long or whatever. And then the rifle measures, I don't know what it is, but it measures a certain length. And the conspiracy theorists go, well, they're wrong because the rifle is this long. But that means nothing to me. So anyway, he takes this into the book depository and stows it away. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. What else you got?
And then I guess he just sort of goes about his workday, right? There are plenty of people who account seeing him, evidence or eyewitness accounts who see him doing his work during the day. Mm-hmm. The parade commences, 12 noon maybe, shortly before.
Well, they get there at 12:29. They pull into Dealey Plaza at 12:29, and at 12:30 is when Kennedy's killed.
So a lot of the employees have left the building by that time, though,
yes.
Right? They've went out
lunchtime.
To the streets. It is, right? And you can see the videos of chronicling the motorcade, right? Mm-hmm. Kennedy's greeted quite enthusiastically. And remember, he's there to bolster his reelection campaign. So he's there to do political work, right? He had been in Fort Worth earlier. He has all these campaign stops along the way. LBJ is a Texan, so he's here running for re-election. The weather was kind of volatile or unpredictable earlier that day. Are you going to put the bubble top on the motorcade car or not?
Right.
The weather clears up. They take the bubble top off the motorcade car. Kennedy sits in the back with his wife. They reach Dealey Plaza, what did you say, at 12:29? Mm-hmm. Maybe we can chat about this, but have you been to Dealey Plaza?
No.
When you see it in the movies or you look at images of it, it seems, to me at least, like it's much more
vast,
spacious. Yeah, it's a lot larger of a geographic area, but it's very compact. The underpass, the building itself, the grassy knoll, it's a very compact area, which threw me a little bit for sort of a spatial loop.
Well, I'm glad you said that, though, because a lot of people I know who have been there, that's the first thing they say is, I can't believe how small it is.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah. You can see so much from anywhere that you're standing. So then the motorcade passes down through the Texas School Book Depository. Everyone's out on the streets to greet the president as he comes by, because he's on the way to some luncheon, right, with some sort of political association.
Going to the Dallas Trade Mart.
Okay.
Yes.
To make a speech for their lunch or post-lunch
Yes.
banquet.
And do you want to hear what that speech was supposed to be? I'm not going to do the whole thing, but there's an interesting part in it. Ready? Want to hear it?
Yeah.
There will always be dissident voices heard in the land, expressing opposition without alternatives, finding fault but never favor, perceiving gloom on every side, and seeking influence without responsibility. Those voices are inevitable. But today, other voices are heard in the land. Voices preaching doctrines wholly unrelated to reality, wholly unsuited to the 60s, doctrines which apparently assume that words will suffice without weapons, that... Come on, JFK, with the big word. Vituperation.
That's that Harvard degree.
I know. Is as good as victory, and that peace is a sign of weakness. At a time when the national debt is steadily being reduced in terms of its burden on our economy, they see that debt as the greatest single threat to our security. At a time when we are steadily reducing the numbers of federal employees serving every 1,000 citizens, they fear those supposed hordes of civil servants far more than actual hordes of opposing armies. He goes on, it's a little further down here. I'll have to find it again. So that's one part there, but there's another part. I'll get to it later on.
So it's definitely a plea for harmony, right, to quell some sort of dissent.
It's a plea for harmony, but he goes on to talk about conspiracy theories.
Political opposition, yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead. So now, all right, let's get to the shots, because this is the interesting stuff.
This is the root of a lot of the conspiracy theories.
How many shots do you say there are?
3 plus.
3 plus.
Oswald plus.
Plus 1?
Plus.
So are you saying there's a second shooter, or Oswald fired more than 3 times?
A second shooter.
Oh, interesting.
I think a lot of the conspiracy theories lean towards the second shooter more. So Oswald plus someone, 3 shots plus fired in any range from 4 to 7 seconds, right? So this is all happening incredibly fast in a very compact area. So Oswald plus. Shots plus.
Okay. So I say 3. And one thing I hear conspiracies saying, and in fact, I think in JFK, I want to say it's Jim Garrison's character, but it might be Lou Ivan's character, his like right-hand man. One of them says, 3 shots and the third one's perfect.
That's the fatal one, right?
Yeah. And to me, now I'm no marksman, but to me, that makes sense because he's nervous. He's firing at a moving target. And I think he fires too soon.
Let's go through the shots, maybe. Let's go through the 3 of them.
I've got visuals for this.
Well, let's do that then.
Well, no, go ahead. No. Go ahead first. Say what you're going to say first.
So the third shot is the fatal one, and we're going to have to talk about the single bullet theory. You have, what's his name? Tagg?
Tagg, yeah, James Tagg.
That's hit with one of them.
Well, he's hit with a fragment of a curb.
Of the first shot? No, it's a fragment of the second.
Well, no. The second shot lands or ends up in Connolly. I think it's a fragment of the first.
Of the first one. And he's standing
by the overpass.
South, down towards the overpass. So
like southwest,
from the Texas School Book Depository.
Yeah.
So that's the first shot. And that hits and wounds him, a portion of it, right? The second one hits Connolly.
Right.
And the third one then is the magic bullet theory that has...
The second one hits Connolly and Kennedy. The second one is the magic bullet. Third one is the headshot. The second one's the
magic bullet. The third one is the fatal shot. The second one has to account for the 7 wounds between the 2 men. The third one is the fatal shot.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Now,
let's look at the
all right.
visuals.
So Joey, I'm going to open up the mic in the back there. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Matt.
All right. Are you compelled so far?
This is absolutely fascinating.
Great. I'm glad you think so.
Discussion.
By the way, we had a couple of callers in the queue, but they quit on us. If you want, call back. We're going to get to calls in a bit. Let's just finish up the day, okay? All right. So, Joey, if you can go to, let me look at my shot list here. We're going to go FBI bullet hole 1. Now, this is a video. I want you to watch closely here. Okay, watch closely here, Jennifer. All right. You got to press the, okay, there we go. Now, this is the FBI's recreation, okay? Now, watch as they come around the corner here. You're going to see a traffic light appear. And this traffic light, now watch, there it is. Okay, now I pause it and look where the circle is. You see there's a little white dot in there? It's kind of hard to see because it's grainy. Okay, but we're going to play bullet hole 2, Joey. I'm going to show you 2 different points. First, you're going to see it paused, or maybe, is that this one? I don't know. Let's see. Okay, there. Now you see it there, so there's something dark behind it. I just want you to see that so that it's not like, a speck of paint. And then there it is again, okay? Now, my theory is that is actually a bullet hole. And that deflected and went and hit the curb, and the curb hit James Tagg. Go ahead to number 3, Joe. This is in slow motion, so you can see it a little clearer, or not clearer, but better. You have a little more time to look at it. Here we are in slow motion. I don't know why they couldn't get people that looked like Jack and Jackie, but whatever. Okay, now as it comes around, you're going to see at the top there first. I believe I paused it again. Yep, there you go. So there it is. So it's a dark background and light background. And then there it is again. Okay. So that's something that was noticed by someone, I forget who, that I saw in a documentary like years later, decades later. I don't think the FBI even caught that. And I saw that and I thought it was interesting because my guess is, here's my guess, ready? He's right below him. So he takes that first shot, but it's too close. It's too awkward of an angle. And that light is in the way. Fires the first shot. By the time you see on the Zapruder film, they pass that area, you can see people kind of looking around because some people hear it, they think it's a backfire, right? So I think it hits that fin or whatever they call that around the light there, and that deflects it, and it goes down towards the triple underpass, hitting a curb, and then breaking off a piece of that curb, which scratches Taig's face. Okay? That's my theory there.
That's bullet one.
That's bullet one. Shot one. Shot number two. Now, this is the magic bullet theory. So let's see. What do I have here for magic bullet here? Single bullet trajectory. Okay, well, first let's do this. Joey, go to the pictures and go to limo seating arrangements, because this is very important. So here's the seating arrangements in the limousine. Now, Kennedy is obviously the guy in the back left. Connolly is in front of him. But look at how they're situated in relationship to each other.
His seat is elevated.
Kennedy's is elevated, and he's more towards the door.
Mm-hmm.
Connolly's is lower, and you can see Nellie Connolly to his left, our right. You can see her seat as the front seat is made transparent, so you can see how low to the floor her seat is. That's a jump seat that folds down, okay? And they're inward. The seats themselves are inward. So naturally, the occupants are going to be a little further inward than the people behind them. Okay. And now you can see the line going through JFK's back. Now, the one thing this doesn't show is how Connolly was positioned. Connolly was not positioned like that. He was in the process of turning around to speak to the president when the bullet goes through both of them.
And maybe heard the first shot, or he's heard something, or once he turns around and says, you can't say Dallas.
No, she says that,
Nellie says that
before the first shot.
Okay, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you, or Texas doesn't love you.
And then he says, no, you can't. And then bang, which is like the most ironic last words ever, or last conversation ever. But anyway, so you got to keep that in mind. Now, Joe, go to single bullet trajectory, please. Okay, now this might be a little hard to see if you're watching on your phone at home, but if you're watching on a big screen TV, it might be easier. So if the top right corner, you've got the 6th floor window, and there's a line going down to the limousine in the car. Okay, and then we have an insert down at the bottom, which is the magnified version of that. And you can see there's a line pointing back to the gun. You see Kennedy positioned, looking, his body is facing straight ahead. The bullet goes through him. Connolly is turned to the right, inward. He's not directly in front of Kennedy. He's turned to the right, and that then explains all those wounds in Connolly. Now, let's get to the wounds, because the wounds are kind of jagged. They're not little bullet holes. They're oblong. Why is that? Go to, Joey, bullet tumble number 1, please. So this is a crude drawing of the idea, but you see that when it goes into JFK, it's going at a straight trajectory or whatever. And then as it comes out of JFK, it starts to yaw, and it tumbles its way into Connolly's back, comes out below his nipple, and bounces off of his wrist and then over into his left thigh. Okay. Joe, there's a bullet tumble number 2. It's a slightly better picture there. And you can see a little bit more detail with that. And you can also see how they're seated from like an overhead shot there. Okay. So to me, when you, and I should have pulled this, but if you were to think of JFK, the movie JFK, when they're in the courtroom and they have that big poster board with the drawings of how the men are seated, and they're both facing straight ahead and directly one in front of the other on the same level. And then they say, there's this zigzag thing, and, theoretical physics can prove that you can hang an elephant from a cliff by a daisy, or by tying his tail to a daisy, but, whatever. That's all fun. It's all clever. It's cute. It's great to, mock the government, which I'm all for that. But it's bullshit. It's bullshit because they're misrepresenting something very vital, which is how the men were positioned.
So why do we need the single bullet theory? Like, why the conspiracy theorists, like, so much rests on this? Because
you need more than one shot, or more than 3 shots.
And they find 3 casings up on the 6th floor, right? So
they find 2 on the floor, 1 in the chamber still.
Okay, so that shooter fires 3 times.
Yes.
So if you take the first one, which is the miss that you showed with the light and the sliver or whatever you call it around it that hits tag, that one's out of the picture. Then you have the third one, which is the fatal head wound. You have to make one bullet account for all those wounds that you just highlighted in the images. So that's why you need to have this single bullet or magic bullet theory. Do you by chance have the Zapruder film?
Oh, we do.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
And I have it in slow motion as well.
Okay. So, yeah.
Because that's the other thing. Yeah, the headshot.
Right. You have to show in the frames, you're going to see Kennedy hit. Well, maybe we just watch it.
Well, we're going to get to that, yeah.
I'll wait then.
There's a picture. There's a still I had that I forgot to load in there, Joey. Oh, darn, that's a bummer. Okay, so you want to move on from the single bullet, or do you want to?
If we do the Zapruder film, I think we can still kind of come.
So do you want to do the Zapruder film before the headshot, or do you want to do the headshot and then the Zapruder film?
Let's do the Zapruder film.
All right.
I would think.
Joey, under JFK videos, Zapruder normal speed. We'll start with that one. Okay. Here we go. Oh wait, before you wait. Hold on. Before you play it, go back to the camera real quick.
And when are the American public? When do they see the Zapruder?
1974
for the first time?
On like Geraldo's Goodnight America or something like that.
So Garrison uses it in his trial, though.
Right. He had to subpoena Time Life to get it.
He said so. Zapruder sold Abraham Zapruder, who's taking just what he thinks is a casual video, records this iconic moment in American history. He sells it to Time Life.
I can't remember if he sold it or licensed it to them.
Time gets it.
Because the Zapruder family had a copy.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was the original or the copy, but they got to keep something. And then I think Time Life had the original for safekeeping and everything, but there was, because they wanted to print it, stills from it. But Zapruder, like one of the conditions was do not put the frames with his head blowing up. Because that the public shouldn't see that. Okay. And it's undignified for the president of the United States. Yeah. Which I agree. It's a horrible way for this guy to go.
So when Garrison is doing his trial, he shows the Zapruder film in the courtroom, and that's in 68. 8 or 9?
8 or 9. 8 or 9.
And
I don't remember.
Span both.
It was February, so it might have been. Well, go ahead. I got it somewhere in here.
And then the American public sees it. If you're not in the courtroom at that time, the American public ends up seeing it. When did you say?
They see it was 74, 75 on Goodnight America, hosted by Geraldo Rivera. And what's that guy? Robert Groden, who was like 20-something at the time, who was a big conspiracy guy. He is the guy who showed it.
Wow.
And this is the first time the public, hears about essentially the back and to the left thing. And you got to remember, it was grainy and shaky, and they didn't have the technology to stabilize the image that we do today back then. Yeah. And it's being shown over television, which also was not high definition.
Yeah.
So you have a very poor picture quality, poor cinematography, with all due respect to Abraham Zapruder. He wasn't a cinematographer, so he didn't get a very good shot. We know it very clearly now because of the way they can manipulate the footage to stabilize it, But the original version of it is quite shaky. And so it can absolutely look like a shot came from the front, especially if you've never seen somebody get shot in the head with a high-powered rifle.
Most of us have.
Thank God.
Not. Right?
Yeah.
But just the magnitude of this source is incredible, that the president of the United States, the assassination of him is captured in essentially a home video. And this is the fourth president in American history to be assassinated, Lincoln, McKinley, and Garfield. And for this to be captured in such a dramatic way. And it's, it's used for conspiracy theories to really run through this with the single bullet theory particularly. So we'll take a look at it. All
right, so go ahead. Now, I just want to say to everybody before Joey shows it here, if you can't handle this, if you haven't seen it, or if you got kids around, you don't want them seeing it, turn it off or get out of the room, kick them out of the room for a couple minutes, because we're going to get into some gory details here. Go ahead, Joey. All right, so here we go. Now, this is a stabilized version, but it's close to the original. It's also, I believe, brightened up a little bit. So here it goes. Now, when he comes out from behind, now he's got the throat, and you see Connolly reacting, and then they slow down, and she look, boom. Okay. So that's it at normal speed.
It does. I hear that.
Of course it does. Now, Joey, go to slow motion. Now, this is kind of tougher to see, but here it is in slow motion, and frame 312 to 313. So it's one frame difference, and it's a very quick thing, but you see his head. Okay, there he is. He's been hit. Connolly's hit. They're reacting. Now his head is going to go forward right before it explodes. Yep, there you go. You just see that? Don't worry, it plays again in slow motion. I think it goes even slower. Now, what you're seeing is the bullet entering the back of his head. That's pushing his head forward. And of course, it's going through very quickly. And it creates I've got it all written down here, and it's a big fancy term. But it basically is like when you were to throw a rock in water, and it creates a void that is then refilled. And there's that, anyway, here we go. Boom. That jet of water that you see, that's basically what's happening in his head.
Man, I've watched that many, many times, and that is so powerful.
It is.
That's incredibly powerful to watch that. Just what a tragic moment it is.
Well, it's just a terrible moment. I mean, this guy, war hero. I mean, let's not forget, this guy, he didn't just appear as president one day. He had a life before being president. He was a war hero. What is it, congressman?
Yeah. PT 109, right? He wins the Pulitzer Prize. His father's in charge of the SEC, which is not the College Football Conference, but the Securities and Exchange Commission. He's absolutely political influence with Joseph Kennedy. His older brother is killed in the Second World War, right? Joe, he was sort of to be the heir apparent to a lot of the Kennedy legacy and hopes and dreams. He's involved in politics, and he emerges onto the scene. Senator Kennedy's emerging onto the scene for the presidential election in 1960, the first election that's presidential debates are televised, when he runs against Richard Nixon, who was the vice president to Dwight David Eisenhower, right? This is an incredibly, as I said earlier, a very charismatic man that so many Americans are sort of resting their promises and potential for their country and individually on him.
And it's like I said before, it's an undignified way to go. Basically no better than an animal being put down. And it's being done in front of people. And luckily, that was the end of the parade route. So it was sparsely populated by people, right?
Yeah. And then I just moved down to Parkland Hospital. I guess, Lincoln's assassinated in front of people, and McKinley is assassinated in front of people, and Garfield is...
I would say those are more around people. I don't know. Or maybe Garfield and McKinley.
The spectacle of the parade makes the difference.
Yeah.
Right?
He's the center of it.
Anyway. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. He's on a stage, essentially. Right. No one else is around him. It's just him out there like a sitting duck.
If you visit, incidentally, and then I'd be kind of curious to hear what you think about this, or maybe some of your listeners, if you visit Dealey Plaza and you go down Elm Street, right in the middle where the fatal headshot occurred, there is a big white X that's painted onto the highway. And I think about that and seeing different people there, and the times I've been to Dealey Plaza standing on the X, of what we think about the spectacle of it.
Yeah. I think human
literally,
beings...
X marks the spot.
Yeah.
Do you want to stand on the spot where the president of the United States was assassinated and snap your selfie?
No,
bizarre.
but Jen, we traipse all over this battlefield here where thousands of men died outright.
I agree.
So, I mean, human beings are weird.
I mean, that's a little... they are, but...
Yeah.
I'm sure...
I mean, it's not the same. It's not murder per se, but
these are armed combatants and conflict and battle versus.
But still, they died.
They do, right?
So it's it's kind of weird for both of us, for both of them, I guess. But anyway, so let me actually, we got somebody on the phone who wants to talk about number of shots. Mike, you're on the air.
Hey, how are you guys this evening?
Good. How are you? Thanks for calling.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to mute this. couple of things. I do want to talk about the number of shots, but did you know that the city of Dallas is getting ready to revamp Dealey Plaza?
No.
They're going to change a bunch. Yeah. I think if you search reimagining Dealey Plaza, you can find it. But it's just crazy. I mean, it's a historical site, and they're probably going to change a lot of things.
That's disappointing. Let's see. I just searched reinventing Dealey Plaza. Is that what you're talking about? Or should
it was
Dealey
either reimagine Dealey Plaza reimagined or
this is from a year ago. Should Dealey Plaza be reimagined? Is the
yeah. Anyway, it's perhaps something for you to look at later, but it makes me ill.
Yeah, it makes me. Of course, I have to pay for a subscription to Dallas Morning News. Sorry, Dallas Morning News, I'm not doing it. Go ahead. What else do you want to talk about with the?
Well, there's and I'm not trying to pull viewers away from addressing Gettysburg, which I think is a great YouTube channel.
Am I going to have to get the bleep button ready, sir?
No, I already put it in the chat.
Oh my God.
On this subject of JFK's assassination, there's a YouTube channel called America's Untold Stories.
Oh yeah, I follow.
And they've been doing some sterling research.
Well, you could go check that out later, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. Yeah, you know what? I mean, it's all archived.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's two excellent books I recently finished: JFK and the Unspeakable. I forget the author, and the other one is JFK, Destiny Betrayed. There's just some really new information in there. There's in my opinion, I don't think Oswald pulled any triggers at all, and I think the shots went like this. And I've gotten into this in some depth. I mean, I'm not a researcher. I'm not a I can never say that word.
Academic.
I'm not academic. There you go. But I think the shots went like this. Number one was either his right shoulder blade or his from the rear. And number two was in the throat from the front, from the direction of the overpass. I'm not saying where it came from.
Uh-huh.
Now, that may be reversed. It might be number one in the throat from the front, number two in the right shoulder blade from the rear. Now
let me stop you there, Mike, real quick. Why are you saying right shoulder blade when those wounds aren't photographed on his body? You talking like just right of his spine? Is that what you mean?
Well, if you go about... If you put your finger in the middle of your shoulder blade and come down.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Roughly.
Yeah.
So about 4 inches right of the spine, roughly. Well, Gerald Ford testified in that second commission they had in the 70s that on the autopsy form, he moved the entry wound in the back. He drew this with a pencil to the base of the neck so that it would line up with an exit wound coming out of the throat.
Now, did that have something to do with his shirt, though? There was didn't this shirt kind of confuse everything because the hole in his shirt didn't line up with where it was shown in the autopsy, so he had to move it on paper, but they didn't take into consideration that his shirt was bunched up and it wasn't taught to his body?
He said he did it to protect the American people from conspiracy theories. He thought the American people would raise hell, and the Warren Commission was... I don't know if Ford said this, but the implication is that the Warren Commission was looking for a single shooter. So Ford did say words to the effect that he was trying to protect the American people from raising hell about a conspiracy. So Gerald Ford himself, on the autopsy form, moved the illustration of the right shoulder blade wound to the base of the neck so that it would line up with the wound in the throat, and see how they're kind of stitching all these wounds together. One bullet did all this damage, this magic bullet bullshit. Okay?
Right.
So this
yeah.
So this is, and there's so many inconsistencies in this story.
But anyway, here's something that, because I used to agree with you on this, and but the thing is that a lot of these conspiracy theories came about when the visual technology was not as good as it is today. Now you can say, well, how do we know that because the visual technology is so good now that when they enhance things and they clear them up and everything like that, that they're also not doctoring them to make it look like, okay, maybe whatever. Maybe I'll give you that. Maybe they could do that, but let's pretend for a minute that they're not. There's a couple of things I don't understand about the position you just described. One is protecting the American people from a conspiracy. What does it matter if it was one guy, two guys, 200 guys? Their president is dead either way. What do they need protecting from? They've already suffered the trauma of losing their president. I never understood that. The American people at that time especially were pretty tough, and I think they could handle that. Now, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't.
They were also very trusting of the government.
Yes, well, they've learned their lesson there.
Oh yeah, and like you said earlier in the show, after the assassination, that plummeted.
Absolutely. But no. So go ahead.
But it was because the point is they had something to hide. Now Gerald Ford wasn't saying, "Well, we have something to hide." That's just the bullshit he came up with. Right. Okay, but Gerald Ford, who was later president, testified that he, on the illustration of the autopsy form, he moved the back wound to the base of the neck so that it would line up with the throat.
But how about
this is the way? This is the way I think it. This is the way I think it went. This just take a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because I know you may have other callers.
Yes, sir.
Shot 1 and 2 are Kennedy's right shoulder blade and his throat. Mm-hmm. Shoulder blade from the rear, throat from the front. If you look at the Zapruder film, before Kennedy's car disappears behind that sign, you can see him already clutching his throat.
Right. Yes. Yeah. He starts to clutch his throat right before he goes behind the sign.
So shot 1, and we'll just say shot 1 was in the shoulder blade. Shot 2 in the throat from the front. Shot 3 hit Connolly. Another shot chipped some concrete down by the curb by the overpass, and the concrete scratched that guy's cheek. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Shot 5 was the kill shot to Kennedy's head from the front, which, by the way, and I have a problem with the grassy knoll. I just don't think there's enough cover to stand there with a rifle on a sunny day. But anyway, it was the head shot was from the front, and then there was an additional shot, which I wish I could remember where I saw this video, but this guy made a convincing argument for this. Then there was another shot that scooped out additional brain material from the rear.
From the rear? What do you mean?
From the rear.
When you say scooped out additional brain material from the rear, though, I don't. From the rear of his head?
Yeah, a shot from the rear came in to the existing crater in his head and took out some more material.
Yes.
So I don't know, what am I talking about there? 6 shots and probably a couple of others. But that terrible, awful headshot obviously came from the front.
Okay. All right. So you are a gentleman who believes that there were more than one gunman. Certainly one of the.
I don't think Oswald had anything to do with it. But I would tell your viewers and yourself and the young lady you're with, check out those 2 books.
Dr. Jen Murray.
Dr. Jen, yes.
Dr. Jen. Sorry, dear. And
not dear, doctor.
check out those two books, JFK and the Unspeakable. Excuse me, and James D. Eugenio's book, JFK: Destiny Betrayed.
Okay.
This spider web goes everywhere. Oswald was honest when he said, "I'm a patsy." He was surrounded by people who were doing things for the CIA, including the Paynes. It's just mind-boggling.
You know, the one thing, there's film of him in the police station being questioned by reporters, and they ask him about being charged with murdering the president, and he says, I've not heard anything about that. All I know is that they've brought me in for killing a policeman. And they say,
Right.
well, you have been charged for murdering the president. And the look on his face is like genuinely stunned. That's the way I see it. And that's one thing that always kind of stuck with me. That's in that 2% where I have a little doubt, because he says, I'm just a patsy. He's remarkably calm and cool and collected in front of the cameras. The things you hear about when he's in the interrogation rooms, he's not so calm, cool, and collected. But again, if we're going the conspiracy route, we can't trust anything that the government says, whether it's Dallas PD or Lyndon Johnson and everybody in between. So what we can see is what the cameras caught. And that always kind of got me. It was like, where he really looks like, why the hell would you charge me with shooting the president? So, I mean,
I think he may have even admired JFK. And about the curtain rods.
And Matthew, I have a question when you have a chance.
Go ahead. Well, wait till the calls, because there's a delay with the calls and it confuses them when they hear too many voices. Go ahead, sir.
I'll tell you what, Matt. I'll get off real quick about the curtain rods. His driver, the buddy who drove him to work all week, every week.
Yeah. You remember his name?
Initially, I want to say Buell.
Yeah.
Bueller, or not Bueller.
Not Bueller.
But I think it's Buell. Yeah, not Bueller. I think it was Buell.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find it while you're talking. Go ahead.
Okay. Buell initially stated that when they got to work on the morning of the 22nd, Oswald had nothing with him but a sack lunch in his jacket pocket.
Okay.
And he later recanted and said, no, he carried in something that he called curtain rods in a bag. Now ask yourself this. Why wouldn't anybody on the Warren Commission or anybody else ask, why in the hell would he carry curtain rods into the school book depository that he was only going to take home at the end of the day? And like
right, why would he not leave him in the car?
Why would he not leave him in the car? And like Dr.
Jennifer Murray.
Like Dr. Jen said earlier, why would he take him to work at all? This just
because there was something I can't remember. I wish I could now, because this is a sticking point for us now. But there was he would stay at the Paynes on the weekend to be with the family, but right. Buell Frazier, by the way, is the guy's name. He, I think, might have lived in the neighborhood. He either lived in the Paynes neighborhood or he lived in the neighborhood that Oswald lived in. I can't remember exactly that detail. Maybe somebody in the audience remembers, and they'll call in and straighten this out.
Yeah, Buell lived like just about across the street from Oswald.
Okay, there you go.
That might explain the story.
Yeah,
because I may have mistakenly been thinking that the curtain rods were for Oswald's apartment. See, I thought the curtain rods were for Oswald's apartment.
Well, they were for Oswald's apartment, and he went over to the Paynes to pick them up before going into work that day. So I think that was the thing that he had Buell drive him over there to get them, and then.
I don't remember that, but
I don't either.
But you may be right.
I think I'm filling in the blanks.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm going to get off so someone else can get on.
Mike, thank you very much for the call. I appreciate a thoughtful call.
Okay. Hey, and keep up. That's my favorite park in the United States. I've been there a dozen times, and I just saw your report on Little Round Top, but I'll let you get back to the topic at hand.
Yes, sir. We'll take care of it for you. All right. Have a good one. All right, Joe, what did you wanted to say?
All right, so I have a comment, and this is to nobody in particular, just sort of conspiracy theories in general, and then I have a question for Dr. Jen.
All right.
First of all, I think what a lot of people do with these conspiracy theories is that they find a narrative that they're comfortable with and fits their opinion, and then they go find clues to meet that narrative.
I agree.
Instead of like finding the facts and then forming their narrative, and I think that's a problem that we have with a lot of these conspiracy theories. With that in mind, and Dr. Jen, I'm certainly this does not include you because you are on the conspiracy theory side. But you've been talking as this conspiracy. You've talked about +1 a couple of times. So who is your most likely candidate to be that +1? And I know that you've mentioned another shooter already. Is there another +1 besides the shooter? And then who are they, or kind of what organization are they working for?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I think I mentioned Buglioso credits 200 and Bugliosi. C. 214 people have been accused at some point of being involved with 42 groups. So I think there's reoccurring themes of whether or not they are other sorts of Cuban-esque sort of people that Oswald is conspiring with. That Sylvia Odio, I believe is the last name, comes up in conversation a lot. She's a Cuban refugee who's living in Dallas. And
they bring him around to her, and then they call the next day, and they're like, "What do you think of Oswald?" She's like, "I don't care about Oswald. I don't know." That guy or that lady. September,
and apparently is with maybe some other people, and he supposedly says in the course of the conversation that the Cubans should have taken out Kennedy, or the Cubans should eliminate Kennedy
and put a Texan in the White House.
Plausible, considering Operation Mongoose. Pigs. Right. It seems like there is a plausible Cuban connection, and no one's ever really.
There's a lot of smoke there, but there's some fire.
Sylvia, right? She seems to be sort of a reoccurring person that isn't really fully addressed. So maybe some way in that way, Joe, I think is plausible. A mafia connection is going to come up a lot. The role of the mafia with the New Orleans connection. Carlos Marcello's deported to Guatemala, who actively speaks out against both Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy as being a possible candidate. I don't know if it's singularly one person there, but more this sort of elusive cloak with the mafia. But I'll say this to your other point about evidence. Go on the National Archives website. Y'all, all this conversation, and we're so dogmatic in our beliefs. The National Archives .gov, NARA.gov, or just Google search Kennedy assassination documents, has digitized thousands of these records. So as we sit here and we're so firm in our beliefs of this many bullets or this conspiracy or this lone gunman, look at the evidence. And I'm a historian who looks at evidence, and so much of this is available and accessible. So as we continue these conversations, always refer back to the sources.
That's a huge point.
Make yourself an informed participant in the conversation for this or any other number.
That's a big point, though, there, Jen, is that it's not like this information is only available to certain people and we have to trust their interpretation of it. It's there for everybody to go and see. I mean, except for the redacted stuff.
Sure, right. Yeah, I mean, you can go to the National Archives. I've done research there for Civil War stuff in Washington, D.C. and the College Park, and the whole 5th floor of the National Archives building is just Kennedy assassination records.
Oh, my God, is that true?
Boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes. So anyone can go into the National Archives and touch and hold these documents from the Warren Commission, touch and hold these original primary sources. That's the work of the historian. Although we don't get into the Kennedy assassination as other groups of people do, but look at the original documents.
That's like a hot potato for historians to touch that one there. Let's see. 318, you're on the air. Area code.
Hey, Matt. It's John Self. Long time no talk, man.
John Michael Self. How you doing? Nice to see you or hear you.
So I didn't know you were doing this. JFK is almost as big as the Civil War for me, pastime. A couple of things. My background.
Yeah, so John, real quick, John was recently on a Patreon episode I call Combat Stories, where I speak with modern-day combat veterans so that we might get just an idea of what a Civil War combat veteran might go through. Because, when you get down to it, death and destruction is all the same. It doesn't matter what era you're talking about. So, John, that's where John is coming from with whatever he's about to say. Go ahead, John.
I don't think the Zapruder film is quite the piece of evidence that we all think it should be or could be. From what I see, those shots that came from anywhere. I tend to fall in the camp that it is a frontal headshot. And I think the doctors that worked on him in Parkland changed their story. Regardless, what you believe what you want, but from my experience, you can't make a determination based on a video. You can't make a determination based on what you think you know about the guy. That was a difficult shot for just a rank amateur.
Yeah.
It's not impossible. And I've always told you the luck plays a huge part in it. But for a stone cold supposed CIA assassin, that wouldn't be a difficult shot. For Joe the layman, that would be a pretty difficult shot given the rifle he used. That rifle is a huge steaming pile of junk. It's difficult to use.
So here, real quick, just an aside. So we were talking about the shots before, and here's my quick theory, John. And you tell me if this makes any sense to you. Shot number one, he choked a little bit too soon. He shot too soon. Shot number two, he's aiming for the head. He's not aiming to hit him in the back, but he misses. He hits him in the head. And if the Mannlicher Carcano is such a bad rifle, as you say, this makes sense to me. He's aiming for the head, but it's such a piece of shit, it hits him in the back. Third shot, he's figured out the quirks of the gun, and third shot, he hits the head where he's been aiming all along. So basically, he's zeroing in, and he finally hits his target in shot number three when enough distance has gotten between him and the target, and he can aim better. What do you think about that?
I think the one thing that nobody considers is that it was a headshot, and a guy trained to do what Lee Harvey Oswald did would not have taken that headshot. It would have been center mass in the body, or as close to the torso as he could have. A headshot is an unpredictable thing. I think that's like kind of skewed the way people think about it.
All right, so that's interesting then. So then, sorry to interrupt you, but so then maybe he's aiming for center mass, but there's not a lot of center mass to aim for, and the next shot is about as good as he can get it, and then he decides to go for a headshot? Or how about this, John? How about this, though? Wait, sorry, one more thing, and then I'll let you answer. How about he's insane? And so everything that you're saying now is what a rational mind with training would think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's something about the guy was off, right? You can see, like, you hit on this just a few minutes ago with your previous caller. When the very first video we get of Oswald, he's kind of cocky.
Yeah.
Or he's damn sure not bewildered. No. And then when he finds out he's been charged, that oh shit moment happens like that. and then he kind of covers it. He stumbled and he picks it back up and listen, I didn't work for the CIA or any super spooky stuff. I just know people that are capable of doing things like that. Oswald fits the mold. And like I've always said, you don't have to be good. You just have to be lucky. And in what the thing though, the reason why I called Matt is this is what really disturbs me. If it was really just Oswald, why the secrecy? Why all this subterfuge? Why all of the things that we know the government did?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that, John, because I'll tell you what. Here's what I think, and Jen, I want your opinion on this too. Okay. The government hiding things feeds conspiracy theories. It makes people, and I'll give you an example that we can all relate to here. When they closed Little Round Top and Devil's Den, and they didn't tell us what the plans were, everybody online was, move into the camera a little bit more, Joe, saying we can't see you. Everybody online was, out there with conspiracy theories. The minute they said, here's what the plan is going to be, that all stopped. You get one person commenting who's like, well, I don't like this. I'm never going to Gettysburg again because they changed my Little Round Top. But for the most part, people are relieved and pleased with what they've seen with Little Round Top. So if that's the way we are when the National Park Service isn't forthcoming with information, then of course we're going to be suspicious when the CIA and the FBI and everybody else is not forthcoming with information. What do you think, Jen?
But aren't they? I mean, isn't that what the Warren Commission is supposed to be?
Yeah, but the thing is...
that is the transparency.
But it's not enough for the cynical and the skeptical. That's the thing is when they do get a document, like the CIA recently released more documents, and like a lot of it's redacted.
Yeah, spoon feeding. Why is it like you're being rationed out, and it's like just enough to keep the theorists going and the people who don't subscribe to the theory. It's like more fuel for the fire.
Yeah,
and
it
so
is.
Eventually, nobody's going to know the truth.
Which is probably what they want. They want us to be confused. Because then that makes them more powerful. What?
I got to speak to Flint Hill once, and he was the guy that jumped on the back of the car, and he's a stone cold man. He thinks that Oswald did, and I think he believes that in his heart of hearts. Just either that or the guy's so damn good at lying. Point is,
yeah.
I think the government is covering up. The only time I've ever seen the government act like this, which is a lot, is when they fuck something up. And just like Afghanistan, just like Iraq, they fucked this up. So it's almost like Occam's razor. What is the simplest explanation?
So that's my point, John. The simplest explanation is usually the right answer. And you're right. My feeling is that there is a cover-up from the government. And the cover-up is how badly they f*** things up. Because they did.
Yeah.
The Secret Service really did. The FBI, I mean, we look, everybody acknowledges this, that Oswald left a note for Agent Hosty, a week or two before the assassination. Now, where everybody differs is what the content of the note says. Hosty says it was something like, if you ever talk to my wife again without me being there, I'm going to blow up the building. Or not blow up the building, but I'm going to do something drastic. And this is the Dallas office, and when they hear Oswald's name on the news, it rings a bell with Hosty, and he goes and he finds the file, and there is the note that he left with the receptionist for Hosty. And he lets his boss know about it. And his boss is beside himself. He's like, oh, God damn it. Like, we had the guy. We could have had him. You could have arrested him for making a threat. But I'm sure Hosty's like, if I arrested everybody who threatened us, I would never get any work done.
Well, everything looks, in retrospect,
of course,
obvious.
Well, and that's what they knew. But that's what they knew. He knew that if this information got out, regardless of how unrealistic it would be, they're going to have a world of hurt because they could have had the guy and the people wouldn't forgive him. So he said when Oswald was killed, he goes, well, he's dead. There's not going to be a trial. Get rid of it. Burn the note. Do whatever. And he burned it and flushed it down the toilet or something like that.
Who does that? No.
People who mess up.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
We have to remember that our government is comprised of human beings, and they screw things up and they want to hide things just like anybody else would. And the thing is, they have power and they have ways to hide their tracks, and they all know that they all do it. FBI knows CIA does it. CIA knows CIA. Everybody knows everybody does it. So when they catch them doing it, unless they have a political reason to nab them, everybody keeps their mouth shut because they're all doing it. So I think that's what we're seeing, is that we're seeing the government covering up certain things that could either be misconstrued or blatantly show that they screwed up. I think that's where you got conspiracy. It's a conspiracy.
And have you heard?
Go ahead.
Have you heard the theory of the Secret Service that was actually the guy that shot Kennedy by accident?
And I really liked that for a while because
I find that more plausible than half the other stories.
So did I, because it's a human error. It's a mistake. For those of you who don't know, there's say it again.
That prescribed a reaction like the Secret Service rushing into Parkland, taking the body. It all kind of, I don't know. I'm just jaded, man. That's cynical, but we'll never know. And I'm going to get off so you can get other people on. But thanks for doing this. I love this subject as much as I love Civil War. And,
yeah, me too.
But you're
well, thank you for the call, John. I appreciate the call.
I'm going to jump off and just finish watching. I'll do good.
Very good. Thank you. Take care. Yeah, that's the thing. So for those of you who don't know, there's a documentary that you can find somewhere online called Smoking Gun. And this ballistics guy, there was something that wasn't sitting right with him. And basically he concluded that one of the Secret Service agents in the follow-up car heard the gunshot and stood up, and he had an M16 slung over his shoulder, stood up and went to pull it up. And as he did, his finger accidentally hit the trigger as Kennedy's head was down, and that's why it took off the top right part of his side of his head. I thought it was interesting. It's an interesting theory. But again, I don't really know if I believe it.
So I think he mentioned maybe that House Select Committee on Assassins in 1979, and didn't their acoustic evidence show pretty conclusively
I'm so glad you brought that up.
There was evidence of multiple gunmen, suggesting that someone was firing shots from the grassy knoll, at least one shot fired from the grassy knoll. And just refreshing, this is 1979, so they're not looking just into John Kennedy assassination.
Yes.
They're looking into Robert Kennedy's assassination, which has its own conspiracy theories associated with it. If you want to count bullets, start counting them in the Ambassador Hotel. And then they're also looking at the Martin Luther King assassination, which has a government FBI element as well. And then Malcolm X, I think Malcolm X is involved in that, maybe not, but those three certainly are. And they suggest, or at least the report shows, that there's a 95% probability that shots were fired from two different locations. Which,
based on that Dictabelt recording
evidence, which, as we've started our show with, is the premise is it's Oswald plus. So you put the other gunman on what they think is the grassy knoll, which explains that fatal head shot. Then you have two gunmen, and that's what the audio evidence shows us in 1979.
We can take the audio evidence off the table, because after the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded that it was the officer was still alive. So for those people that don't know what we're talking about, there was a recording of the police transmissions that day, and one of the officers, whose name escapes me, but he was a motorcycle cop, and his microphone button, well, I forget what they call it, there's a name for it, but the button that you hold in on the CB was notorious for getting stuck in the on position. And so it records a lot of sound. It's very staticky. If you ever can find it and listen to it, you can make out very few things. But there was a claim that there are 4 rifle shots. But upon further examination later on, they found that you can actually hear a transmission, and they know that transmission was made, meaning a verbal transmission, that it was made after Kennedy was hit in the head. And so the timeline of the recording doesn't work. It was after the assassination. Joey, you raising your hand back there?
I do. I have another conspiracy theory question. I am a pop culture kind of guy. There is always that conspiracy theory that Charles Harrison, Woody Harrelson's father, took credit for taking the shot. Do we lend any kind of credence to that, or do we dismiss that?
I don't, but I also don't know enough about it to confidently say that.
Yeah, can you tell us more about it?
So Woody Harrelson's father, Woody on Cheers, his father killed, I believe it was a federal judge. And
I think you're right.
And part of his kind of crazy plea deal to killing the judge, he said he was actually the gunman that shot Kennedy. And I am not a conspiracy theorist. I am a lone gunman theorist. So I haven't dove too much into it, but I do find the tie fascinating.
I know that that theory I've heard very seldom repeated by conspiracy theorists. So that's why I don't think I think even they call bullshit on that one.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't really know enough about it, though.
I don't know enough about it, but I have two things kind of related to that, or maybe secondary to that. One is this notion of evidence. So I just said about the 1979 evidence, and you're immediately like, take it off the table. And I think that's, you mentioned earlier about fueling this conspiracy theory, is the technology changes. It
improves.
It improves, right? It's not like Civil War records where we can look at Meade's letters or Chamberlain's letters. You know, the technology of the written documents that we're generally used to using as sources for 2,000 years doesn't change. But here it does. And that's why you get a more kind of nebulous interpretation. Like, interpretations are not static or monolithic because technology is going to introduce new evidence or clean up old evidence or discount evidence, which we're not used to really doing in the Civil War world unless there's like this new treasure trove of documents found. And that's incredibly rare. So we're working from a historian's perspective with shifting evidence more than what we do as a 19th century scholar.
Sure.
So that, I think that's important. Secondly, I'm curious, and you mentioned earlier about Oswald's interview in the Dallas Police Department. This has always struck me because we spent time talking about him at the beginning, while he has this, volatile upbringing, and then he does these crazy things and he wants to take credit for it, like the attempted assassination on Walker. If you assassinate the president of the United States, why does he not just flat out admit right there, that was me?
That's a great question.
As many other evidence suggests that he would want this credit rather than being confused. I didn't know I assassinated the president of the United States.
I think he likes, first of all, the attention. I think he likes the misery and the stress that he has caused. And I think he hates this country. He hates the people of this country. He hates the system. It has not served him well, and he wants to make it suffer. And he is going to draw it out. Maybe eventually he would confess, but he likes the fact that all these people are paying attention to him, and they're paying, or they're asking him questions, and he is confounding them. He has the ID in his wallet that says his name is A.J. Heidel. And then he's got another one that says is Lee Harvey Oswald, and they ask him, well, who are you? And he says, you're the detectives, you figure it out. He is a petulant child in a 24-year-old's body, and he is going to milk this for everything it's worth. Again, you have to get into the head, the mindset of a malcontent who would do something like this.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the other presidential assassins who more readily claim the credit of assassinating the president in...
So, okay, what would the McKinley and Garfield, one of them was a socialist. What was the other guy?
The disgruntled post office man, Charles Guiteau.
He went postal.
And he was an anarchist.
He was.
Okay, so they're both... Okay, all right, so they both have causes, right? Of course, they're all political. Lincoln, though, I don't really know much about the other guys. But Lincoln... John Wilkes Booth is an actor. Okay, now I know actors; they're fragile people, right? And he's an actor who is a Confederate sympathizer, and he's not very happy that they're done. They've lost, and Lincoln is the lightning rod for his anger and the anger of millions of other Confederates, I'm sure. He wants to be known for his cause. Oswald, okay, he's a Marxist-Leninist, but what exactly is his cause? His cause is him.
Well, that's what I said earlier. Like, even the Warren Commission admitted that establishing motive was there was ambiguity to it, right? So an assassination on a political figure, does it need to be politically motivated? Does he need to be an ideologue to assassinate a political figure?
I don't think so. I think you need to be crazy.
Self-aggrandizement.
No, was Chapman? Was it Chapman?
Who assassinates Lenin?
Oh, no, the other one. I'm sorry. I always get these guys confused. Reagan's guy. John Hinckley. Thank you. John Hinckley.
Yeah, Chapman assassinates John Lennon.
Hinckley thought that he was doing it to impress Jodie Foster, no? What was his political motivation? I don't think you need to have political motivation, no. I don't think you need to. I think you need to be crazy. And I think Oswald was crazy. Squeaky Fromm was crazy. what was her motivation? She was, what? Was she in the Manson family?
She was a Manson, yeah.
Yeah, they're nuts. So I think, you can have a political motivation, but I don't think you have to have a political motivation. But so let's go back to the dicta belt, though, because you had other points there.
About the shifting landscape of evidence, maybe.
No, but you listed off the dicta belt, and then you had a couple of other things with it, and there I wanted to get to them too.
I don't remember.
Oh, damn it.
Was it the House Select Committee on?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about, and you mentioned the dicta belt with the 4 shots, and I said that they debunked that.
Second roll.
See, that's the thing. Now, here's another thing that I notice with conspiracy theorists versus the record. When you read a conspiracy theorist and they quote, let's say, a witness, they don't quote them entirely. A very famous film clip is an interview that Johnson did, I believe, with Walter Cronkite, actually, after he left office. And they talked about the Warren Commission. And they always love to play the clip of him saying, something to the effect of that he doesn't buy the Warren Commission's conclusion. But they don't play what he says before and what he says after. They take it out of context. So what he says before and what he says after is not at all that he doesn't buy it. He does. He buys it. He says it. I believe it. I believe they were right. So that's dishonest. And I'm not saying the government is ever honest. But if you're going to claim that the government is evil and the government is wrong and we're virtuous, then show some virtue. Be honest. Don't fabricate things. Don't lie through omission. Don't manipulate things to make me believe what you want, which, again, government does that too. But I know they do that. I'm trusting you, the conspiracy theory. I'm trusting you, Jim Mars or Mark Lane or Jim Garrison, because you're the person calling bullshit on the government. But then I'm finding out that you're full of shit too. And I don't like that. Now, so we got a lot of things to cover. Now, I got some people in the queue here. 6 questions I'm going to get to you right now. If you can narrow it down to one question, that would be great. 6 questions, Lance, world famous star on the phone right now. Go ahead, 6 questions.
Well, thank you. I'm not here to weigh in on how many shooters there were, how many bullets there were.
Right.
A detailing forensic analysis of bullet trajectories or things like that. For me, I tend to look at this, and we're about 60 years on.
Yeah.
And so right now we've passed on from the contemporaries who lived at that time, are either passing on or have passed on.
Yes.
And so now we are in a place where we could have someone look at this objectively without emotional bias and try to look at the evidence and come up with a detailed and kind of a history of it. We're kind of in that sweet spot. So, Dr. Jen, I have a question for you on this one. Why is there a seeming reluctance from academics to tackle this particular subject? Is it because of all the conspiracy theories around it? Or are academics more concerned about the ramifications of the Kennedy assassination on America?
That's a good question, Michael. I was curious about that, too, and I was thinking of some potential answers to that, why trained historians have not gotten into this topic, because there are many great presidential historians that live among us in our generation and in past. But I'm not sure I could sort of ascribe a reason why they have avoided it and led it more to the assassination sort of buffs or the realm of these kind of amateur historians, if it is just something that's so contentious. I think one of the simple matters is that academics write books to get promoted, and I sort of feel like tackling a topic like the Kennedy assassination is maybe not the best choice of a topic to build your academic career on and move up the chain of promotion, where things need to be peer reviewed and you need to rely on evidence and facts. That there's probably a really simple explanation to that topic. And the same is true with the Lincoln assassination too. I mean, that generally has been the realm of non-academics writing on the Lincoln assassination also, right? We write on any other number of Civil War topics, but assassinations seem to be one that we tend to avoid more.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think it's probably about promotion and sort of what the ivory tower's value in scholarship.
I know. Mike, anything else? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, for me, I think the more interesting study would be studying the theories that have come out of the Kennedy assassination, who has proposed it, who believes those theories, and looking to see if there are any demographic or any sort of trends or patterns. And what does that say about American political culture and American life and discourse in America? I think that would be a more interesting subject coming out of this rather than talking about the assassination itself.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. Yep.
Anything else, Mike?
That's it.
All right. What do you think about Woody Harrelson's dad? Oh, he hung up. All right. I got two other people in the queue so far. Just hang on there. We want to get to something else. I just want to move it along. Let's talk about back and to the left for a second, the head wound, because this is what kills him. And all right, so I got a little something here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's some links in the description here. This one is a study done. Let's see. It was received 26 October 2017, revised 1st February 2018, accepted April 6, 2018. Nicholas R. Nally, Nalli. It's called Gunshot Wound Dynamics Model for JFK Assassination. You can go and look it up. It's there's many pages, and I ran out of printing it. And Major, my dog, ate half of it, so I had to reprint some of it too. But Jen, if you go to page 20, and it's section 2.2.
Are you in this document?
Yes. It's I think 20 might be here. What page is that? It's at the bottom there.
That is 20.
Oh, that is 20?
The same thing you said.
Okay, yep. Right there where I said back and to the left. Okay, so section 2.2, if you're following along with us online.
Right.
Indirect effects of projectile-target interaction. Okay. The phrase back and to the left, and I'm sorry this might get a little dry and boring here for you folks, but let's watch, as I read this, let's watch the Zapruder film. Very good, Joe. The phrase back and to the left was used in the blockbuster Oliver Stone film JFK, 1991. Figure 5, so I encourage you to look this up either now or later so that you can see the stills here. Figure 5, which is on page 21, shows Zapruder frames 313 through 316. And they capture the back and to the left motion exhibited by the president immediately after the bullet impact. Clearly there is a backward movement, but the movement is delayed and slower than the forward impulse discussed above. Now, if you look again here at the video, okay, we've already passed it there, so you'll see it again when it replays. But as I'm reading this, watch the video and see if you see what we're talking about. Okay. Alvarez, what is his first name? Well, he's a professor. I don't have his first name here. He's mentioned earlier in this article. So Alvarez considered this problem based upon simple idealized energy and momentum conservation arguments, along with simple experiments involving tape-wrapped melons as proxies for live human heads. Subsequent experiments have repeated Alvarez's results using more realistic proxies. In this paper, the backward movement is re-examined theoretically in more detail. Like the current author, Professor Alvarez did not take pleasure in having to delve into the subject matter, but was, quote, convinced that the conclusions are important, end quote, and thus strove to, quote, make the text as free from emotional content as possible, end quote. I think it's important, as a little aside here, is that we get very emotional over this stuff. People who weren't even alive then get emotional over this stuff. We want to believe it, but for some reason, we can't separate the emotion from some things that are right in front of our face, like the Zapruder film, which is not on anymore. Okay. With that said, Professor Alvarez realized that, quote, the president's head did not fall back, but was driven back by some real force. Alvarez estimated that the recoil would be about twice the initial velocity brought about by the collision. We're talking about the collision of the bullet with the head. He was curious about the magnitude, but more emphatic about the direction, and modestly deferred the details of the kinetic energy transfer mechanism to, quote, someone more knowledgeable in the theory of fluid mechanics. However, he already intuited the basic idea, namely that the, quote, conical shape of the interaction zone is the key to the non-negligible efficiency of the energy transfer. Now, what does that mean in English? How the hell do I know? Now, energy transfer mechanisms. Although the phenomenon of a high-energy projectile passing through the heterogeneous body, e.g., a human head composed of hard and soft tissue, falls squarely within the realm of classical Newtonian mechanics, it is nevertheless something not readily observed in everyday experience. Let me repeat that. It is nevertheless something not readily observed in everyday experience, and thus not immediately intuitive to the average lay person. Again, none of us have seen someone get shot in the head. Now let's just look here at, with everything I read in mind. Let's look at frame 313 through 316. These frames are numbered, so there's JFK clutching at his throat there. And he's getting slowed down. Okay, we're in the 300s. Okay, ready? Whoop. Okay, very quick. It's very quick. It happens very quickly. Now, if everybody watching at home wants, if those of you who are skeptical to what I'm saying here, I can go in to the control room and I can pull up Adobe Premiere and I can do this frame by frame, and I can go between 312 and 313 and show you the motion of the head just from one frame to another. So we'll see if anybody, Joe, let me know if anybody in the comments wants that. Okay, moving down the page a little bit there, Jen. In the case of soft tissue, as opposed to purely Newtonian fluids such as water, an analogous phenomenon is manifested in what is called temporary cavitation. Cavitation. Yes, okay, I said it right. Namely, the temporary development of a near vacuum in the wake of a bullet that is rapidly closed via the pressure gradient and elasticity of the tissue, resulting in restoring forces that can lead to additional violent undulations before the material fully returns to equilibrium. Does that make sense?
I'm reading this for the first time, and it's a lot of science.
It is a lot of science, but does it make sense? In other words, when you throw a rock in the water, right? So what's happening is the bullet's going into the head.
Ripples.
Well, yeah, but like it's almost like a vacuum until it refills itself. So like the bullet goes in the back of the skull. And I hope there's some science-oriented people in the comment section or who could call in and, put this in better English than I can. It goes through the skull, which is hard, but now it's in the head, inside the skull, which is full of, mushy brain. And it's got its own energy, which as it goes through the mushy brain, it's creating a cavity, and there's energy building up in the brain, which blasts out the side of the head, the front of the head, which is what the combination of that force and the fact that his brain, which is, it's like the central nervous system's, it needs the brain. And when you tear the brain apart, the nervous system is going to do some things. And his back, as we can see in the film, tenses up and he falls back from. So in other words, he has no control over his muscles anymore. And this is all happening in like a split second. His brain is being destroyed. And then the force of the jet coming out of his head pushes his limp body, uncontrollable body, back now into his wife. And it goes back into the left, not because there's a bullet pushing him from the front right, but because the force is blowing out the front right of his head. And he doesn't have the control of his muscles anymore. And he's wearing a back brace. And that's what's holding him upright. Like, it's why it's when he is, going over from the throat wound, he's not bent over. He's not going down on Jackie's lap. He's kind of stuck in this upright position. And when you see him fall over after the head wound, he falls like a tree. He doesn't slump over. He falls over stiff like a tree. Okay. The temporary cavitation effect leads to the expanding interaction zone and can deliver devastating damage to the tissue of human target, especially less elastic organs such as the brain. Tragically, this is observed in the Zapruder film. Here, the large wound inflicted on the president's head was not a bullet exit wound, but rather the region of maximum temporary cavitation associated with kinetic energy transfer. The kinetic energy deposit propagated radially outward in the form of an expanding pressure wave, resulting in a rupture and explosion of the skull. Mr. Zapruder himself observed this while filming, as he would later testify to the Warren Commission that, quote, then I saw his head open up and the blood and everything came out. Clint Hill was mentioned before. As he is jumping up on the back of the car, he hears the sound of, I think he likened it to a cantaloupe being dropped on pavement or concrete or something like that, as the bullet hit his head, and then he got sprayed with blood and brains like Jackie did as well. I think the caller said before, was convinced that it came from the rear. That man became a tremendous alcoholic from that. He blamed himself for that. He did not have a very good life after that moment. I really have a hard time believing that he would be a part of any conspiracy and would willingly lie about. I believe these people who were there.
So just to get us back out of the weeds for a second, this is the science. Science proves. Science proves? Does science prove that there is the crater exit wound? I've flipped to page 32.
Okay.
Where he's asking, is there a shot from the front? And your Professor of Science here on page 32 says the short answer is no.
Yes, right.
So what became popularized with Kevin Costner and the movie JFK, he's saying the science and the impact of the bullet doesn't support that back into the left notion. So there's not a gunman firing from the front of the grassy knoll or the bridge because of the impact of the wound.
Now, you've been there, and I don't know if you actually went and looked at this with this in mind, but I have a friend who was a conspiracy theorist who is no longer a conspiracy theorist because of his trip there. And he said he went on the grassy knoll and he saw the X and he had a picture and he was looking at the picture and he's like, if I'm standing here and I'm shooting Kennedy in the front right of his head, it's not going to blow out the back. It's going to blow out in Jackie's face. She would have been hit. It would have gone through his head and hit her. It's like here with Gettysburg or any battle, you have to go to the place. You have to go to the ground, or you have to listen to the people who have been there. And even then you have to make sure that they're being honest with you. But you have to look at angles. This is all geometry and physics. So you look at the angles of where they think the gunman was on the grassy knoll. And if there was one there, Jackie would have been a casualty too. It doesn't work. In order for it to have been here and blow out the back of his head, as they claim, there would have to be more on the overpass or something like that, because that's more in front of him, and that would have been more in line with blowing out the back of his head. But as you could see in the Zapruder film, if we go look at it again, Joe, I'm sorry, but I really believe this. If you go and you look at it, you see the side of his head flap off because it's still attached. What skull fragments didn't fly up and forward, or back on the hood. The rear hood, were attached to his skull or to his scalp. And here we see it's going to flap in a second. Ugh. You see that? Look at that. It's hanging over his ear. And also, let's not forget, his head it's not looking straight forward. So I think we've belabored this point enough, okay? What else, Jen? Give me another one. Oh, let's go to a call while you're looking for something else to do. Rich Snyder is on the phone. Rich, you're on the air, sir. Hello, Rich.
Hello, Matthew.
How are you?
I'm well. I'm glad you and Dr. Jen are doing this tonight. I just have a couple of things. Dr. Jen, you said something about the Warren Commission, that I found kind of interesting. You talked about how its formation was to give the American public some transparency into JFK's assassination. And one of the things I've always had a problem with that is that they appoint the former CIA director who JFK fired, Alan Dulles, to lead that group. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys in a CIA kind of connection is if you give any credence to E. Howard Hunt, who was involved in Watergate. Apparently, two of his sons claim that he made a deathbed confession to having been, quote unquote, involved.
Right.
And possibly along with Frank Sturgis, who was also a part of Watergate. Now, both of those gentlemen were CIA operatives involved in the Bay of Pigs.
Sure. I think if you think of the Watergate era and how contentious it was, isn't that where we get the phrase, it's not the nature of the evidence, but it's the seriousness of the crime? Like, it doesn't matter what the evidence is, as long as we accuse you of something serious, that's what matters. I think that if the Democrat Party knew or had any whiff of anybody related to Watergate being involved in the Kennedy assassination, their Jesus Christ, I think that would have come out. Unless that means then that the Democrats were also involved with JFK's assassination. I think E. Howard Hunt, if he's a scumbag that he's going to be part of all that subterfuge and sabotage and espionage and all that stuff with Watergate, I don't see how he would be trustworthy on his deathbed. And I think his sons are probably trying to make some money with that claim. Did they record it? Do you know, Rich?
I don't know if they actually made a recording of it, Matt. I do not know that.
I'd be interested to hear it if he did. But also, you're dying. You say anything. What does it matter? Go ahead, Jen.
Well, that CIA connection, especially involving Alan Dulles as part of the Warren Commission, it's just always really troubled me.
Well, the Alan Dulles thing isn't so weird, though, because I know what you're saying, and they make this point in JFK that he was fired by Kennedy. So, Kennedy or Dulles would be part of a conspiracy and then put on the commission to help cover it up because, blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't that contentious as I understand it, the firing. And Kennedy commended him for something. He got some kind of commendation from Kennedy before the whole
did.
Thing. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
politics is nasty. Anybody who's in it, especially as long as Dulles was, you understand how it works. And I don't see any of these offenses that Kennedy supposedly committed against these people to be enough to kill him. It's not anything abnormal. Like Kennedy wasn't some like rogue coming in there and just, tearing shit up. Like, he wasn't doing anything or proposing anything out of the ordinary than any other president before him or since has done, as far as I'm aware. I didn't study his presidency too much, so I might be wrong there. But I know you hear about, he wanted to end the Vietnam War and everything like that. Okay, so he wanted to end the Vietnam War. What? You're going to kill him for that? And here's another thing. Why are you going to kill him in front of people and risk it being photographed or filmed instead of just poisoning his food in the White House? Why, if you're the CIA, you are the CIA, you are the spookiest people on the planet next to the KGB, and you can't figure out a better way to off the guy?
Hey, Rich, thanks for listening to this. It's an interesting divergent to working on George Meade right now, but I wish I would have looked over a little more of the Warren Commission composition, but I was thinking about Earl Warren himself and just how polarizing of a figure he is. This is the guy
I don't know much about him.
You could drive through regions of the United States and see the Impeach Earl Warren signs. He's appointed by Dwight David Eisenhower, expecting to be pretty conservative on issues particularly pertaining to race. This is the same Supreme Court in its composition that will integrate schools with the Brown v. Board of Education case in 1954, and then its successor the following year.
Absolutely.
So it is a very politicized composition, and some of the critics you mentioned, the CIA, believe that the Warren Commission didn't really explore some of those connections, Oswald's alleged connections, or explore the CIA or the FBI a little bit further. And one last sort of point on that. When have we ever seen the government move fast? This Warren Commission report is released in 1964, and there's no doubt that they're thinking of the presidential election. LBJ fulfills the remainder of Kennedy's term. As we know, he runs for election in 1964 on his own right against who? Barry Goldwater. So the election and the looming ramifications of what this means to the Democratic Party is certainly very important. So I think there's a lot of urgency, as the conspiracy theories would suggest, of getting this commission to go through. Oh my God, Matt, listen to this on Audible. The Warren Commission report is enormous.
It's 26 volumes.
Okay, right. I mean, that's like sitting down and reading all the official records, and like it's a tremendous amount of information.
Took me a year
to digest, right? But there's some urgency to wrap that up, so we can focus on the 1964 election, looming civil rights issues, and escalation. The Gulf of Tonkin happens in August of 1964. There are other issues on the horizon now that are taking America's attention in other directions.
But I also don't think that I don't really know that maybe it's not such a conflict. I think we've made it complicated and convoluted since the Warren report. But perhaps it could possibly be that the Warren Commission was able to do it quickly because it was a pretty simple case. It was, once they look into the guy, again.
Case closed.
Case closed, exactly. But no, really, you look into the guy and you look into all these other things. I don't know. I think that, again, we want to believe that there has to be something bigger to take down the most powerful man in the world. But I think there are 3 times beforehand that prove that you don't need that. And I don't know. I think this is a good. Rich, anything else?
No. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on those aspects.
Well, thank you very much for the call, sir.
Thanks for listening, Rich.
Well, yep. Take care, guys.
All right, you too. Douglas, hang tight. We're going to get to you in a second. All right, now listen. So you mentioned impeach Earl Warren.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to get into Jack Ruby real quick. Okay, Jack Ruby, because another thing is everybody's like, well, Jack Ruby was a hitman for the mob, and he had to kill Oswald so that Oswald wouldn't squeal. Okay. Jack Ruby is very similar to Oswald in one regard. He's a wannabe, but he's a loser. He wants to be a big, tough guy, but he's not. What's his motivation for killing Oswald? Do you know this?
What the conspiracy theories say, or more?
Well, either way.
So you're right. So you already hit the conspiracy theory point that he needs to take out Oswald. He's killed within 48 hours after the assassination. So that's pretty remarkable. What Jack Ruby sort of goes to the bank or something, doesn't he go that morning?
Western Union.
The 24th to Western Union or whatever. He has his dog with him, which I was... Sheba, would I find a little dachshund kind of interesting. So he goes and then he walks back to the Dallas police headquarters. He's a known quantity there. He has familiarity with people there.
You know why?
Because he's in the criminal syndicate.
Because he's a groupie. He's a cop groupie. And he kisses their ass when they come into the Carousel Club.
So they turn their eye to the...
Well, he's kind of a little snitch. He's a wannabe. He's another person who wants to matter. And so but he's also a very aggressive guy. The strippers that work for him, they have like a love-loathe relationship with him because he could be very nice and gregarious and he would go to the ends of the earth to take care of them, especially if they had problems with their boyfriends. But he also slept his way through all of his strippers and he would be very violent with them sometimes if they got out of line. So he was another one of these loose cannons. But here's an interesting thing, though. Where is this? What is this from here? This is from, let's see, Forensic Research and Criminology International Journal, MedCrave. The link, I believe, is in the description. If it's not, I'll put it in there later. I pulled some of these things late. But this is from Robert M. Kaplan, forensic psychiatrist, University of Wollongong, Australia. I don't know how to pronounce that. This is done in 2015. Ruby, named Jacob Rubenstein when he was born, changed his name to Jack Ruby after moving to Dallas because the name Jacob Rubenstein isn't going to fly too well. His sister already lives there. His brother had already changed his name to Ruby, so he continues, and he goes by Jack Leon Ruby. That's the name that he changes himself. He says his petition to the 68th Judicial District Court of Dallas alleged that he sought to change the name because the name Rubenstein was misunderstood and too long, and because he was, quote, well known, end quote, as Jack Ruby. And it makes a point here that Americanizing a surname was not uncommon for Jewish people trying to assimilate in U.S. society back then. Earlier that year, his brothers, Earl and Sam, had changed their name to Ruby too. He says he may have taken this step to make himself stand out less in Dallas, a town that was hardly receptive to a Jewish hustler from the wrong side of Chicago. He dealt with this by adopting the local ethos, wearing large-brimmed hats, high collars, and going to clubs dressed in Western outfit, leading him to be known as the Chicago Cowboy. The failure of his club in 1952 led him to being briefly on the streets and having to return to Chicago for several months in a state of depression. He bounced back and returned to Dallas, and he managed to start some more clubs. And then by 1963, he had a rock and roll dance hall, the Vegas Club, and a strip club, the Carousel Club. The Vegas was run by his sister, and the Carousel Club became the focus of his activities, if not his identity. He liked to portray it as a classy entertainment joint, but in reality, it was a strip club catering to tourists, visitors, and anyone who had a taste for seedy burlesque. He was his own bouncer and would use his fists more than was necessary. And this tough guy image was reinforced by working out in the gym. He was a police groupie. He encouraged officers to come to the club where they were always treated generously, often walking out with a bottle of whiskey under their arm. There was self-interest in that as well, of course. He was also a minor snitch, which had mutual benefits with the police. It provided information to the police on offenders and fed Ruby's need to feel that he was a law enforcement player. And while he liked to big note himself as a high-ranking mobster running a hotshot nightclub, all serious writers regard the idea of Ruby having connections to organized crime as risible. Is it risible or risible? R-I-S-I-B-L-E. Come on, you're smarter than me. You should know this. The truth is that far from being a mob lieutenant, Ruby ran two seedy clubs that barely managed to survive and was dependent on not antagonizing the real mobsters to ensure that his club stayed open. He was friendly with the police, who tolerated him as a minor snitch, who gave them freebies at clubs, and hung around the press, who regarded him as a, quote, born loser, end quote. Ensconced in Dallas, Ruby joined the local conservative synagogue, Sherith Israel, I hope I didn't mispronounce that, in Dallas, where Rabbi Hillel Silverman conducted service. Ruby went to Friday night service immediately after the Kennedy assassination, where the distress was evident to all. Now, I'm going to summarize this. There are two documentaries I recommend you watch on Amazon Prime: Conspiracy Theorists Lie and The Truth Is Our Only Client. Bugliosi is prominently featured in The Truth Is Our Only Client.
Yeah, I looked for that on Prime and I didn't see it. I'll
have to share. I'll share it with you, and you have the link to it.
No, look good. Sounded good.
It is good. They're both very good. And so there was a ad run in the paper. I think it was the Dallas Times. And this ad, it's you've seen it. There's like a black border around it.
Treason.
And it's not the wanted poster. It's basically like the Declaration of Independence, how it lists all the grievances against the king, and this lists all the grievances against Kennedy, who they say was a communist sympathizer. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. All right, so essentially, I don't want to read all this stuff to you here, but essentially, he is hyper aware because his parents immigrated here from Europe, and he's fully aware of anti-Semitism and all that stuff, and he's hypersensitive to it. There is this thing here. It's a half-page ad, bordered in black, accusing the president of being a communist tool, signed by the, quote, American Fact-Finding Committee, Bernard Weissman, chairman. Ruby sees this name, Bernard Weissman, and then Kennedy is assassinated a day or two later. And he is afraid that it was this whoever committee that did it, and that the Jews are going to be blamed. And so so it says here, the possibility of an anti-Jewish conspiracy weighed on Ruby's mind throughout the day. When he heard that Kennedy had been assassinated, he was devastated, breaking down in tears. So intense was Ruby's distress that despite the trauma of the event, it surprised many who knew him. He could not understand how anyone would want to murder his hero, the man who held the highest office in the land. His sister was to later say that he took the death of the president even harder than that of his father in 1958. His anguish notwithstanding, the political advertisement did not leave Ruby's thinking. His preoccupation with the matter worsened when he saw a roadside billboard with the inscription in large letters, "Impeach Earl Warren," which listed the post office box number 1754. In this inflamed state, with his inbuilt reading difficulties, Ruby immediately linked the number with that listed in the newspaper advertisement, which was 1972. So anyway, his mental state starts really to decline. And what happens on the day that he kills Oswald is one of his dancers calls him and needs $25. And so he goes down to Western Union, which is like 2 doors down or 1 door down from the police station where Oswald is being held. Now he goes at like 10 o'clock in the morning. It was publicly announced that Oswald was scheduled to be transported at like 9:30, 9:45. But he's delayed for some reason, and I forget the reason why. So if you're going with the intention to kill the guy because you're a mob hitman, you're a little late, okay? Yeah. Right? You're a half hour late from what is scheduled. He goes to Western Union. There's proof of that. Western Union corroborated everything. Leaves his precious dog Sheba in the car. Mm-hmm. Okay? He loves this dog. Leaves her in the car, and it's like, oh, they haven't, he hears, I guess, that they haven't moved him. They're about to move him. Oh, let me go down there and see. People know him from the police department, so he's able to walk in, not because of some grand conspiracy, but because they know him. And he strolls in. He's standing there. He sees Oswald. Oswald's walking out with that smirk on his face, and it enrages him. And he has a pistol in his pocket. Why? Because it's Dallas, frickin' Texas. And people have pistols in their pockets. And he walks up and he shoots him in the belly. One of the cops recognizes him immediately and says, "Jack, you son of a bitch." Mm-hmm. And Oswald dies 2 hours, or is pronounced dead 2 hours later. Ruby then gets crazier and crazier after he's arrested and, on trial. And it's very interesting. It turns out he has lung cancer, and there is some question as to whether or not he had a brain tumor forming as well.
And he dies.
He dies of lung cancer.
Like 1967,
I think so, yeah.
Pretty quickly after the assassination.
So Ruby's another one of these people who's a nut. They're nuts.
Well, there's no doubt that Ruby's role fuels the conspiracy theories. You can imagine a scenario where Lee Oswald's actually transferred and he goes on trial. Right. It goes on trial, and then a lot of these questions are resolved in a court of law.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Booth, he's resolved in another way.
Right.
The Garfield assassin, Charles Guiteau, has his day in court, right? That's more neatly wrapped up. You can imagine that if Lee Oswald had that opportunity, it would mute, I think, many of the conspiracy theories.
Oh, I think so too. Or if he had just confessed.
Significantly. Well, yeah, right. If Oswald would have confessed. So there is no confession. We talked about that. Still, his sort of lack of claiming his role in the assassination is something that's always been interesting to me.
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, it is a very fascinating thing. Now, I want to wrap this up here because I'm sure people have to go to Betty Bye. But Douglas is on the air with us now on the phone. Douglas, what say you, sir?
Well, hey, Matt, and hello, Dr. Jennifer. Your scientific thing that you were bringing up about the headroom, probably about the best thing that I could think of is if people would go and actually watch the videos on ballistic gels.
Yes.
For the cavity. I mean, that would be the fastest way for them to get all of that scientific stuff down. But I believe that Oswald didn't work alone. I mean, I don't know who the other gunmen were. And the reason is because one is the Mexico connection with the theory that he was down in the embassy down there. And I don't know if Dr. Jennifer has seen the pictures or the films that were out of Parkland with the windshield damage from the front. I mean, I don't believe that the limo, when it was speeding down the road, got hit by a rock. I mean, there was only 2 police motorcycles in front of it.
Is that what they said? And the other thing, a rock?
I've heard some people say that it was a rock. I mean, you can tell definitely something banged off of there, and it wasn't the size of a rock. I mean, it looked like it was an actual shell. But
could it have also been, though? One question, Douglas. Could it also have been the fact that the bullet that went into his head fragmented, and it could be a fragment from that?
It's that I will grant that that's very possible.
Okay,
but I will also say this, that I've never seen a pristine bullet before going through so many bones.
I'm glad you brought up the pristine bullet. We have a photo of the pristine bullet. So while you're talking about it, we're going to look at it. Go ahead, keep going.
Okay. Well, I mean, the way the pictures that you had with Kennedy and Connally sitting in the limousine are exactly right, because the governor was in an inboard. He was pushed in closer, more inboard, so that shot lines up. But in my experience that I've had in life, I've seen bullets, go through, one piece of bone, and it just be distorted. This thing that I'm looking on at the screen, they even said in the reports that there was more, residue, or there was more of the bullet that was in his wrist, the grammage of it. But like I said, I've never seen a pristine bullet in my life go through, something like that.
Well, I would argue that we're not looking at a pristine bullet. We're looking at a deformed bullet.
Well, yeah, and I agree, but but I mean, if it went through two different types of bones, that bullet should be a lot more distorted than that.
Well, let's put it like, Joe, can you go to what is it here? Bullet Tumble 1 or Bullet Tumble 2, either one.
So to just sort of add to that, to jump on what your caller's saying, that particular bullet penetrated 15 layers of clothing. If you sort of look at all the the different entries, and 15 layers of clothing, 7 layers of skin, muscle tissue, the back braces, ribs, wrist bones.
We're not talking about a mini ball. We're talking about a rifle round that is
even
going
on the tumbling. I mean, even on the tumbling, I'm just talking about a bone impact alone. That's, that, and she's right. You're not talking about going through the muscle. You're not talking about going through I'm just talking about bone impact itself, because, it's to me, in my experience, I've never seen anything like that before.
Have you seen the videos of them shooting this round through 3 feet of wood and it coming out basically the same?
No, I haven't seen that one.
So there's a lot of stuff out there if you care to find it. And I know, and I'm not saying this is you, Douglas. I'm speaking in general terms, but I know that a lot of people are married to what it is they want to believe. And, for whatever your motivation is, let's say you're just an angry person who's been screwed by the government and you want to believe that the government is absolutely capable of this, and you won't hear any argument that flies in the face of what you have come to believe that you are comfortable with believing. And listen, I understand this because I was a conspiracy theorist. I totally believed that there was a second gunman on the grassy knoll. Absolutely believed it. But somewhere along the line, I said, it's not fair to me, not the government, not anybody else. It's not fair to myself to not look at the other side of things and make a decision based on who has the more compelling evidence. And the one problem I have with the conspiracy side is they have questions, they raise eyebrows, but I think they know that the average American is not going to look further than whatever it is they present to them. So Jim Mars, all these guys, they know that most people are not going to go and look up these reports. They're not going to go to the National Archives. That's why they're buying Jim Mars's book, because he did it. Mm-hmm. And he's selling what they want to buy. And so it's enough for them to say, well, Jim and I agree that's, it's more than one gunman. So whatever he says in there has to be true. And then when someone comes along and says, yeah, but look, here's the whole quote. And Jim only played this or only gave you this one line. They refuse to believe it. That's where I lose, patience for the conversation, because I understand. I've been there. I've totally been there. Doug and Jen, I was there with you guys, but I don't have the evidence on the conspiracy side. I have questions, and that's not evidence. And so,
well, and that's the thing of it. I mean, it's always good to question the government.
I totally agree with that.
It's always a good thing. Now, let me ask you a question. Are you going to talk about the death of the witnesses during this?
Well, we don't have time today. Maybe we could do that next year, is get into the more outward stuff, because it's a long show already. But I mean, just generally, here's my whole stance on this thing in general, with all the evidence that we're talking about. I'm going to go and I'm going to account for every minute of Jen Murray's day tomorrow. And I'm going to look at some behaviors and go, that's weird. What's Jen up to? And she's up to absolutely nothing. But when you know more about November 22nd, 1963, and everything that Oswald did, then you know what you ate for breakfast this morning. That's not healthy, number one. Number two.
Yeah, exactly.
But number two, nobody's day, nobody's time is supposed to be that accounted for. When you look at what a person does in a day, it could be suspicious. If I have a creative mind and a suspicious mind, I can make innocent behaviors by Jen Murray look suspicious. Now, Oswald was not innocent. He was up to something, right? Let's say he didn't pull the trigger, but he was part of something. Let's say that. Well, he was part of a conspiracy. He wasn't, we didn't even talk about Tippit or when he was arrested or any of that other stuff. How he got out of the building, the people who heard the shots coming from the 6th floor. Anyway, but point is, I think that if you look at the witnesses, I know it's a 3-hour show, Joe. I know. I would finish it if you didn't distract me with notes in the window. If you look at the witnesses, who die in the years coming, people die.
Yeah, I think one of the sources say there's 103 people who die suspiciously, under suspicious.
Right. Why is it suspicious, though?
Somehow associated as part of the conspiracy. 103 people. Right. Convenient.
What are we talking about? Car accidents,
that's
gunshot
how the movie
wounds?
JFK starts too,
Yeah.
right, is with that.
Karate chops. You know.
Yeah, people die in weird ways. And when you pay attention to people that you otherwise wouldn't pay attention to, you'll find, man, they die in weird ways. It's just the way it is. I mean, I don't know. I don't find any of it suspicious, especially like Lee Bowers is a good one. Well, go ahead.
I think that when the Lloyds of London said that the odds of you getting struck by lightning during that time period between the witnesses when they started giving testimony and when they died was more or less likely to happen to you than for you to be, mysterious this time. That was something else that kind of raised my eyebrow about it too.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that make you raise your eyebrow, but doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm going to let you guys go. You have a good night.
All right. Thank you very much, Douglas. You have a good night, too. Thanks for calling. And finally, we're going to end with a lawyer. Okay. And also grandson of the great Rue McClanahan. Matt McClanahan is on the phone. Hello, Matt.
Hey, good evening, Matt. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Got a question. How do you think the history of the United States would have been different had Kennedy lived?
Oh, that's easy. We would all be skipping through fields of forget-me-nots, holding hands, and just loving each other.
I mean, no doubt.
No, I mean, go ahead, Jen. You're more.
I think your question is one that fuels such interest in this particular topic of the Kennedy assassination because it's retrospective, right? It's an inflection point in American history where this moment in Dealey Plaza irrevocably alters the course of American history. We see it that way in 2023. What would Vietnam have been like? I mentioned earlier about Kennedy in Vietnam. I mean, there's certainly compelling evidence that at that time, the United States only had advisors in Vietnam, that maybe South Vietnam wouldn't have turned into the quagmire that it was. We know Kennedy was more conservative on social issues, race particularly, than his predecessor LBJ would have been, what the civil rights movement might have looked like. All these are interesting questions, and I think that's why we are so fascinated with the Kennedy assassination. But the last thing I'll say on that, too, is sort of our collective innocence is something that always strikes me, that this is a moment where our nation's sort of collective innocence is shattered, and we become bitter and disillusioned. Young men are dying in Vietnam. The Cold War escalates. The civil rights movement escalates. LBJ, followed by Nixon, will have their own sort of series of problems. And for many of us, that moment ended, that naivete ended in Dallas. But that's why this is a fun intellectual exercise, right? Because what if? What if?
I know. It's a shame, too, that we would never know, because he seemed like a cool president, seemed like a good guy. Joey, you got something there you want to add to Matt McClanahan?
I just want to, as a point of fact, Jim Koth was a writer for the Dallas Times-Herald who was able to search Ruby's apartment, and he was, in fact, killed by a karate chop to the throat.
Ruby?
He searched Ruby's apartment and then was later killed by a karate chop to the throat.
Yeah, that's strange. That is strange. Must be
as one is wont to do sometimes.
Yeah, right. Matt, thank you for the call, sir. Well, wait, hold on a sec. Hold on, wait. Now, you're a lawyer. I want to know, where do you fall on this?
Sure. So, I believe that Oswald is the one who killed Kennedy. So, that's my take. I do not believe in a larger conspiracy. I think that my basic take on it is, when you think of someone as great as John F. Kennedy and you think of someone as forgettable as Lee Harvey Oswald, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The math in our mind, it's like, how can a nobody kill the President of the United States and Camelot and all the Kennedy aura? But that's life, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, who would have think that John Wilkes Booth could kill Abraham Lincoln? But he did.
Right. Yeah, John Wilkes Booth to me is weirder than Oswald, Because John Wilkes Booth was like the Brad Pitt of his day. Like he had something to lose.
That's true. It's kind of like, it's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man.
But Oswald had, man, appreciate you guys very much. Thank y'all.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Have a good one. And I have to take this one only because it's international. Former governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura, is on the phone. Mr. Ventura, Governor Ventura, it's such an honor to have you on.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
How's it going?
Hello. Good. How are you? You know, I thought you were going to do a Jesse Ventura impression.
I can't with this accent.
All right. From Australia. How you doing, Grant?
Pretty good, mate. Pretty good. Just saw that this show was going on. I had to add my 2 cents.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's obviously Colonel Mustard from the grassy knoll. I mean, come on.
Oh, I love how you Aussies think our presidential assassinations are funny.
Yeah, I got a headache watching the show.
Did you? Is that from the Zapruder film being played over and over again?
Oh, of course. Back and to the left, mate.
Right. No, really. What do you think as a foreigner? What do you think? Do you guys even think?
Well, yeah, we don't have a brain in our heads. But honestly, I think, obviously it was influenced by the movie for so long as a kid and all that. But
yeah.
I think Oswald did shoot, but I think the way they painted him as just a nobody that no one knew. I've always thought like he did bump into a lot of interesting people that had, weren't losers like him. That's all. And I thought there's always just a little more to it, but I certainly think he did the shooting for sure.
Yeah. So you think it could be someone else was with him, but then who? Why haven't we found out who? There's that old saying, three people can keep a secret if two of them are dead. But I was talking to somebody the other day, I can't remember who it was, and he said, one person can't keep a secret. How many murderers were caught because they couldn't keep their own mouths shut? Plenty of them were.
Yeah, that's true.
So you're telling me that there's someone else who was involved in the JFK assassination who is yet to come forward with compelling evidence to prove that he's the one who did it. I don't know.
You make a good case. It's one of your only good ones, but but yeah, like I said, I'm not. You guys know it so well, and it's like you grew up with it much more than obviously we do.
How old do you think I am?
So you would know Well, no, you're only slightly older than me.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
But you're ancient, mate. But yeah, as I said, like I think as an American, you guys are probably more into the details enough that you would have a better call than someone from overseas. So I bow to your knowledge on this one, I guess.
That's dangerous. Bow to Jen's.
I know, that's true.
Yeah. Jen's got the FID after her name. I don't. PhD. Grant, I appreciate your international support. Thank you very much for listening and for calling in to bust my balls all the time.
And that's a nice flannel you got there, mate. Nice one for the collection.
I noticed, this is my show shirt. I wear this often just for the show. I noticed you were commenting about it a couple of weeks ago. I know you guys don't have flannel down there in Australia.
Oh, of course not. Yeah, but someone mentioned it, and now I can't not notice it. So,
yeah, I just think it shows up on the camera better. Thank you. You're very welcome, Grant. Have a good time. Don't choke on your dinner. All right, let's bring this to a close here, Jen. I really appreciate you coming and doing this and spending 3 hours listening to me prattle on about this. I could go another 3 if you want.
Well, it was fun. We've certainly talked about this, and its roots go some months back. I'm sure we did good justice to the topic.
I hope so.
In 3 hours, and hopefully, if nothing else, generated some thoughts among your listeners, right? Got them maybe
a lot of comments,
interested or reinvigorated in what is no doubt one of the most important events of the 20th century in American history. Like the magnitude of this is surpasses many other events in our nation's history. And hopefully it encourages people to read more on the topic, right? To go and look at some of these books, but also to be skeptical and not just consume what you're reading like fully, right? But to think and ask questions. And I mentioned before, and I don't know if you can drop a link in the chat or not, but so much of the Kennedy documents are available in the National Archives.
Yeah, do you know the actual? Well, I'll find it. And I'll put it in the description later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in this stuff, and this is the academic historian saying this, like go to the original sources, do some of the legwork here for yourself, immerse yourself in the documents, and make your own sort of conclusions based on what the evidence says, and do so with a critical eye. But this was a ton of fun. It's an event that I've been interested in for a long time. I've not looked in the Kennedy stuff for years. I've moved into the 1860s sort of thing. So it was good just to get back into this and have a good conversation about this topic.
The mic's open in the back there. Anybody want to add anything? I know you all want to go home. You're all tired and hungry and you got to work tomorrow. But anything back there?
Pizza's on the way.
Oh, thank God.
Right.
I was going to say we should order pizza. Whose idea was that? Was that Cindy's idea?
Yeah.
I knew it. Thank you, Cindy. Okay. Listen, thank you, everybody, for watching. There are links in the description. I'll add more as we go. I think, look, if you're new to this whole subject, by all means, watch JFK first. It's total bullshit, but it is a great movie. It's one of the best movies ever. It's
like watching the movie Gettysburg to get interested.
Exactly. It'll wet your whistle.
It's the same entry.
Although Gettysburg is less bullshit. There's not a lot of bullshit in Gettysburg.
Well, it doesn't have mead featured prominently in it, which is a huge oversight. But
that's bullshit.
It is.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's a good gateway
drug.
The film drug to either topic.
Absolutely. And I think if you go to JFK, you watch it, it is a masterful film. Just a masterful example of filmmaking. Oliver Stone is a fantastic filmmaker. The editor, the soundtrack is great. Whoa, John Williams does the soundtrack. I mean, you'll love it. It's a great movie. Watch it. Then look up Truth is the Only Client or Our Only Client. I'll put a link to that too. Also, Conspiracy Theorists Lie. Both of them present the conspiracy theory and then refute it with evidence. But Conspiracy Theorists Lie, a good chunk of the end of it, maybe the last third of the movie, is the filmmaker with his camera in Dealey Plaza on the anniversary of Kennedy's assassination, talking to all the conspiracy theorists. And it's interesting, and it's just worth the watch. If you're a hardline conspiracy theorist, I hope you can open your mind enough, and not that you're closed-minded, but I hope that you could just give it a chance and consider these other things. I think when you watch the Zapruder film in slow motion and you see the head go forward, that should make you go, right, Joe? But if not, okay, whatever. There's nothing I can do about that. If you're an Oswald did it person, and you've always been an Oswald did it person, watch JFK.
Didn't his brother write a book?
Who? Oswald's brother?
Brother.
I think he did.
We maybe put that in the comments.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Parkland is another good movie. Not going to help you so much with conspiracy theory stuff, but just to see what the doctors went through and Abraham Zapruder went through. Very interesting movie. Pretty well done, I think. A lot of good stuff out there to watch. Whatever your stance is, consider the other side and then see where you fall. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I could say anymore. What I would like to do, though, is remind everybody that though we talk about this and we have fun talking about it and it's interesting and, whatever your stance on the whole thing is, a human being was killed. 2 human beings were killed, but fuck Oswald. President Kennedy was killed. And let's end, Joey, if we can, with first, of course, John salute, and then the close-up, and then we'll end it there. So thank you all for watching. Jen, thank you very much. Everybody in the Peanut Gallery, thank you for your time back there, sitting and watching. And I can see you're all starting to wake up now. So just stretch yourselves. We're going to get pizza. And yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Matt, can congratulate Dr. Jett on something real quick.
Go ahead.
Your book is fantastic. The second edition came out.
Which book are we talking about? This one here? On a Great Battlefield?
On a Great Battlefield.
Yeah, there you go.
Amazing.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that.
You are so welcome. It's fantastic.
There's a very nice inscription in here, but I'm going to keep it to myself because it's very nice. And it's, frankly, it would look like a humble brag if I read it out loud. So I'm not going to do it. All right, let's see John saluting. Thank you all for your patience, for watching. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, God. Guys, you got to hate me. We did a poll right off the bat in the beginning. I said, did Oswald act alone? Out of 94 votes, 51% say yes, 48% say no. Basically the way our presidential elections go, right?
It's polarized America.
We are such a split country. It's amazing. Here's a picture. Thank you all for watching. Have yourselves a good night.